The greatest mysteries in history were never hidden. They've been standing before us for thousands of years. Across the world, ancient civilizations left behind monuments so extraordinary that they continue to challenge archaeology, engineering, and modern science alike. Their builders carved mountains into temples, assembled multi-ton stones with astonishing precision, and created structures that have survived earthquakes, wars, and the passage of time. We know who built some of them and when they were constructed, yet the most important questions still remain unanswered. How were they achieved with the tools of their age, and why did so much of that knowledge disappear? Every new discovery brings us closer to the past, but somehow pushes the truth even farther away. High on the rugged slopes of Mount Parnassus in central Greece lies one of the most enigmatic sanctuaries of the ancient world, the Temple of Apollo at Delphi. For more than 1,000 years, this sacred site drew kings, generals, philosophers, and ordinary pilgrims from across the Greek world and far beyond. They travelled great distances not only to worship the god Apollo, but to seek guidance from the famous Oracle of Delphi. Yet, long before any prophecy was spoken within its stone walls, the location of the temple itself had already set the stage for mystery. Perched dramatically between towering cliffs and overlooking a vast valley below, the sanctuary occupies a geographical position so striking and unusual that many scholars believe the landscape itself was central to Delphi's spiritual power. The strange placement of the temple, combined with unusual geological features beneath the mountain, has raised questions that continue to intrigue historians, archaeologists, and geologists alike. The sanctuary stands on a steep terrace carved into the southern slope of Mount Parnassus, a mountain long associated with divine presence in Greek mythology. From the temple's platform, visitors can look down across the sweeping olive groves of the Pleistos Valley, a vast green basin that stretches toward the distant Gulf of Corinth. The dramatic contrast between the towering cliffs above and the open valley below creates a setting that feels both isolated and elevated, as if the sanctuary existed in a space between earth and sky. Ancient travelers approaching the site would have climbed winding mountain paths, gradually ascending from the valley floor until the temple suddenly appeared before them, surrounded by treasuries, monuments, and sacred structures. The journey itself may have been designed to heighten the sense of entering a place removed from ordinary human experience. What makes Delphi's location even more intriguing is that the sanctuary sits precisely at the intersection of two major geological fault lines. These fractures in the Earth's crust run beneath Mount Parnassus and converge directly beneath the temple platform. For centuries, this fact went unnoticed, but modern geological studies have revealed that these faults may have played a crucial role in shaping the site's reputation as a place of divine communication. In ancient descriptions of the oracle, writers often mentioned a mysterious vapor or breath rising from a chasm beneath the temple. According to these accounts, the priestess known as the Pythia would sit upon a sacred tripod above this opening and inhale the vapors before delivering prophetic messages believed to come from Apollo himself. For a long time, many historians dismissed these descriptions as myth or exaggeration, because early excavations failed to identify any obvious fissure beneath the temple. However, later geological surveys discovered that the limestone bedrock beneath Delphi is fractured by intersecting faults capable of releasing gases trapped deep underground. Some researchers believe that these geological conditions may have allowed light hydrocarbon gases, such as ethylene, to seep through cracks in the rock. Ethylene is known to produce mild euphoria and altered states of consciousness when inhaled in small quantities. If such gases did emerge naturally from the ground beneath the temple, they may have contributed to the trance-like state described in ancient accounts of the oracle. The possibility that geological activity influenced religious rituals at Delphi raises fascinating questions about how ancient people perceived their environment. It is entirely possible that the original founders of the sanctuary noticed unusual sensations or natural phenomena occurring at this location long before the temple was constructed. Subtle smells, warm air currents, or faint vapors rising from the ground may have seemed like signs of supernatural forces emerging from the depths of the earth. In a world where natural phenomena were often interpreted through the lens of mythology, such experiences could easily have been understood as the presence of a god speaking from beneath the mountain. Equally intriguing is the symbolic significance of Delphi's position within the ancient Greek worldview. The site was believed to mark the very center of the world. According to legend, Zeus released two eagles from opposite ends of the earth, and the birds eventually met above Delphi. To commemorate this event, a sacred stone known as the omphalos, the navel of the world, was placed within the sanctuary. This concept of a cosmic center was deeply important in many ancient cultures, but Delphi's dramatic landscape made the idea particularly powerful. Standing on the terraces of the sanctuary, surrounded by towering cliffs and vast horizons, it is easy to understand why ancient visitors might have felt they had reached a place where the boundaries between human and divine realms became blurred. The geography of Delphi also gave the sanctuary strategic advantages that may have contributed to its long-lasting influence. Located near important mountain passes connecting northern and southern Greece, the site was accessible to travelers from many regions. Pilgrims coming from Athens, Sparta, or the cities of Asia Minor could all reach Delphi through established trade routes. At the same time, the mountain setting provided natural protection, ensuring that the sanctuary remained relatively secure from large-scale attacks. This balance between accessibility and isolation allowed Delphi to become a neutral spiritual center, where rival city-states could seek guidance without entering enemy territory. Beyond its physical location, the natural acoustics of the mountain landscape may also have enhanced the mystical atmosphere of the sanctuary. The cliffs surrounding Delphi create unusual sound reflections, and voices spoken on certain terraces can carry across surprising distances. In an age when the religious ceremonies often relied on spoken chants and proclamations, such acoustic effects could have amplified the dramatic impact of rituals performed within the sanctuary. Pilgrims waiting outside the temple might hear echoes of voices drifting through the sacred complex, further reinforcing the sense that unseen forces were present within the mountain. Another layer of mystery lies in the possibility that the placement of the temple followed a deliberate pattern of sacred geography known to ancient builders. Some researchers have noted that Delphi lies along a network of ancient pilgrimage routes and sacred sites across Greece. Whether this alignment was intentional or coincidental remains uncertain, but it suggests that ancient architects may have chosen the location not only for its natural features, but also for its symbolic relationships with other important sanctuaries. In the ancient world, landscapes were often viewed as living entities filled with spiritual meaning, and selecting the right location for a temple could be as important as the structure itself. Over the centuries, earthquakes repeatedly damaged the Temple of Apollo, forcing the Greeks to rebuild it several times. These earthquakes were almost certainly caused by the same fault lines that run beneath the sanctuary. Ironically, the geological instability that threatened the temple's existence may also have contributed to its sacred reputation. In a time when earthquakes were often interpreted as signs of divine activity, the trembling of the ground beneath Delphi could easily have been understood as the movement of Apollo himself. Even today, standing among the ruins of the temple, visitors often remark on the strange atmosphere of the site. The sweeping mountain views, the silence of the surrounding cliffs, and the dramatic drop toward the valley below create an environment that feels both majestic and unsettling. It is a place where the natural world seems to dominate human presence, reminding observers that ancient builders deliberately chose a landscape capable of inspiring awe. Despite centuries of study, the full story behind Delphi's location remains unresolved. Did ancient priests deliberately select a site where geological gases could induce prophetic trances? Were they guided by mythological traditions that identified the mountain as a sacred place long before the temple existed? Or was the sanctuary simply built in a location whose dramatic beauty naturally inspired spiritual interpretation? Each possibility offers a different perspective on the relationship between environment, religion, and human imagination in the ancient world. What is certain, however, is that the power of Delphi did not come from architecture alone. The temple's influence was deeply connected to the extraordinary landscape that surrounded it. By placing the sanctuary at the intersection of mountain, valley, and hidden forces beneath the earth, the builders of Delphi created a setting where geography itself seemed to participate in the sacred rituals performed there. The result was a place unlike any other in the ancient Mediterranean, a sanctuary where the physical world and the realm of myth appeared to merge. In the end, the mystery of the Temple of Apollo at Delphi may lie not only in its famous oracle, but in the landscape that made such an oracle believable. The mountain, the faults beneath the earth, the rising vapors, and the sweeping view across the valley all combine to create an environment that ancient people interpreted as a gateway to divine knowledge. Thousands of years later, even as the temple stands in ruins, the strange and powerful geography of Delphi continues to raise the same question that pilgrims once asked as they climbed the mountain paths. Was this remarkable place chosen by human hands or by forces far older and deeper within the earth itself? High in the rugged landscapes of southern Bulgaria, hidden among the dramatic cliffs of the Rhodope Mountains, lies a little-known archaeological site that continues to puzzle researchers and historians. Known as Chitkaya, this remote rock formation appears at first glance to be just another natural outcrop shaped by time and erosion. But a closer look reveals something far more intriguing. Scattered across the steep stone surfaces are dozens, perhaps even hundreds, of carefully carved niches cut directly into the rock face. Their shapes are deliberate, their placement purposeful, and their origin remains one of the quiet mysteries of the ancient Balkans. These niches vary slightly in form but often appear rectangular or trapezoidal, carved with surprising precision into the hard stone. Many of them measure roughly similar dimensions, suggesting that whoever created them followed a consistent pattern or ritualized standard. Some are shallow, while others are cut deeper into the cliff, forming cavities large enough to hold objects or containers. What makes the site particularly fascinating is not just the presence of these carvings, but their location. Many niches are positioned on steep or nearly vertical sections of the rock face, areas that would have been extremely difficult to reach without scaffolding or climbing techniques. The question naturally arises, why would ancient people invest such effort into carving so many niches into such inaccessible places? Archaeologists generally associate Chitkaya with the ancient Thracians, a group of Indo-European tribes who inhabited much of southeastern Europe long before the rise of classical Greek and Roman dominance in the region. The Thracians were known for their elaborate religious traditions, mysterious cult practices, and strong connections to sacred landscapes. Mountains, caves, and high rock formations often played important roles in their spiritual life, serving as natural sanctuaries where rituals could be performed close to the heavens. Within this cultural context, some scholars believe the niches at Chitkaya may have served a ritual function. One theory suggests that the cavities were used to hold funerary urns, containing the cremated remains of the deceased. Thracian burial customs were complex, and in some regions the ashes of important individuals were placed in rock niches or small chambers carved into cliffs. If this interpretation is correct, Chit Kaya may once have functioned as a sacred necropolis overlooking the surrounding valleys. Yet the evidence supporting this idea is incomplete. Excavations around the site have not produced a large number of funerary remains or burial artifacts that would clearly confirm the presence of cremation deposits in the niches. In many cases, the niches appear empty today, offering no obvious clues about what they once held. Another possibility is that the cavities were used to place ritual offerings. Small statues, ceramic vessels, lamps, or symbolic objects might have been placed inside them during ceremonies honoring local deities. The Thracians are known to have practiced forms of mountain worship and nature-based rituals, often involving sacred peaks and dramatic landscapes. If Chit Kaya was considered a holy place, the niches could have functioned as small altars or containers for offerings presented to the gods. But even this explanation raises further questions. The sheer number of niches carved into the rock suggests that the site was used repeatedly over a long period of time. Carving each niche into solid stone would have required considerable labour, especially with the tools available in antiquity. Bronze or early iron chisels would have been the primary instruments used for such work. Yet the edges of many niches appear remarkably straight and controlled, implying that the ancient craftsmen possessed not only the necessary tools, but also a high level of technical skill. The physical challenge of creating these carvings is equally mysterious. Reaching some of the higher niches would have required ladders, ropes, or temporary scaffolding structures anchored against the rock face. This suggests that the site was not a spontaneous or casual construction project. Instead, it likely involved organized groups of workers carrying out carefully planned tasks over an extended period. The arrangement of the niches also adds to the intrigue. At certain sections of the cliff, they appear clustered together in patterns, sometimes aligned in rough rows. Such organization hints that the creators were following symbolic or ceremonial guidelines, rather than carving randomly. Some researchers have proposed that the niches might represent individual families, clans, or ritual participants, each carving their own space within the sacred rock. Still, without inscriptions or written records, the exact meaning of these patterns remains unknown. One of the most puzzling aspects of Chit Kaya is the silence of history regarding the site. Ancient Greek historians such as Herodotus, who wrote about Thracian culture and religion, never mentioned a location matching this description. Roman sources also fail to provide clear references to a rock sanctuary filled with carved niches in the Rhodope region. As a result, the site exists in a strange gap between archaeology and recorded history. This lack of written documentation forces modern researchers to rely almost entirely on physical evidence and comparisons with other Thracian sacred sites. Across Bulgaria and parts of Greece, archaeologists have discovered similar rock sanctuaries where niches were carved into cliffs. Some of these places are clearly linked to Thracian rituals dedicated to solar deities or fertility gods. However, none appear to contain quite the same concentration or arrangement of niches seen at Chit Kaya. Because of this, some scholars suggest that the site may have served a local cult rather than a widely recognized regional sanctuary. It could have been sacred to a particular tribe or community, whose traditions were never recorded by outside observers. Over time, as populations shifted and new cultures moved into the region, the original meaning of the site may simply have been forgotten. There is also the possibility that Chit Kaya's purpose evolved over centuries. What began as a small ritual site might gradually have expanded as new generations continued carving niches into the rock. In this scenario, the cliffs themselves became a growing monument to the spiritual life of the community, a layered record of devotion preserved in stone. Standing beneath the towering cliffs today, it is easy to imagine the ancient rituals that might once have taken place there. Fires flickering in the darkness, offerings placed carefully into the carved niches, voices echoing across the mountain valleys during ceremonies that have long since faded into silence. Yet without definitive archaeological evidence, these scenes remain part of a story that is still incomplete. What makes Chitkaya truly fascinating is that it represents a type of ancient monument that does not easily fit into modern categories. It is not a temple in the traditional architectural sense. It is not clearly a cemetery, nor a fortress, nor a settlement. Instead, it exists somewhere between nature and human creation, a landscape transformed by ritual activity but never fully explained by it. And perhaps that ambiguity is precisely what makes the site so compelling. Across the ancient world, many cultures left behind monumental structures designed to endure for thousands of years. But places like Chitkaya remind us that not all sacred spaces were built with towering walls or elaborate sculptures. Sometimes, the most mysterious monuments are those carved quietly into the landscape itself, leaving behind traces that raise more questions than they answer. Even after centuries of study, the niches of Chitkaya continue to challenge archaeologists. Were they funerary chambers, ritual offering holders, symbolic markers of clan identity, or something entirely different? The truth may lie somewhere among these possibilities, or perhaps beyond them. For now, the cliffs remain silent, their ancient carvings watching over the mountains as they have for millennia. And somewhere within those carefully cut niches may still linger the memory of a forgotten ritual world, waiting for the moment when its purpose is finally understood. Amid the Rhodope Mountains of Bulgaria, where grey veils of mist cling to cold, sharp, rocky slopes, stands an ancient structure shrouded in countless unresolved mysteries, the Perperikon Thracian Oracle. This is not merely an archaeological site. It is a ritual labyrinth, a religious fortress, a prophetic centre, and above all, a testament to ancient technologies that seem far ahead of their time. From afar, Perperikon appears like a massive natural rock formation, but once one steps inside, a startling realization emerges. The entire structure was carved directly out of the mountain itself. Every staircase, corridor, sanctuary chamber, and stone throne, not assembled from blocks, not constructed from masonry, but hewn from solid bedrock with a precision that borders on the inexplicable. What do you think enabled ancient people to carve an entire complex directly into the mountain with such astonishing precision? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Many researchers believe this was once the sacred prophetic centre of the Thracians, where kings and priests sought divine messages. Faint ancient accounts even claim that Alexander the Great and Roman Emperor Augustus received prophecies here. Yet Perperikon still holds countless historical voids. We do not know which deity was truly worshipped, how prophetic rites were performed, or why the structure demonstrates a level of technical sophistication far beyond what traditional understanding attributes to the era's stoneworking abilities. But the greatest, most debated, and most confounding mystery is Perperikon's monolithic stone architecture, a system carved directly from the mountain with a scale surpassing any other known Thracian construction. These are not stone blocks transported from elsewhere, nor walls assembled from cut stones. Everything is seamlessly connected to the natural bedrock, as if some force had sculpted the entire mountain into a colossal ritual complex. The sanctuaries with their nearly perfect flat surfaces, the deep and evenly cut ritual channels, the stairways shaped from single continuous slices, and the long corridors carved straight into the rock, all raise a question no archaeologist has fully answered. What tools did the Thracians use to achieve such precision? Excavations reveal no traces of iron tools capable of cutting stone with such straight and sharp surfaces. The bronze or crude iron axes of that era could not have produced the smooth, almost machined quality seen here. This lends Perperikon the aura of a structure born from technologies not belonging to its supposed time period. One of the most perplexing areas is the fire and wine ritual chamber, where the Thracians performed prophetic rites by burning sacrificial wine. The floor of this chamber is flattened to an unbelievable degree, as if polished using industrial vibration or grinding technology, something no known civilization of that period possessed. Surrounding it are narrow, deep channels flowing in unusual curved patterns, possibly designed to guide wine or blood during sacrificial ceremonies. Their uniformity has caused scholars to question, is this truly human craftsmanship or the remnant of a technique now lost to history? Some speculate that the Thracians might have used fire, water, or thermal softening to work the rock, yet no evidence suggests they possess such advanced mastery of heat treatment. Venturing deeper reveals a vast ritual urban complex composed of palaces, temples, corridors, and a throne room. More astonishingly, the entire layout seems oriented along a solar axis, implying that the Thracians engaged in precise astronomical measurements to position their ritual chambers. For a remote mountain culture to integrate architecture, astronomy, and religious function into one unified system remains something modern scholarship cannot fully explain. The perfectly flat surfaces, accurate right angles, and ritual channels evoke the image of a society with far greater technical expertise than what has been found at other Thracian sites. What shocks researchers most is that there are no constructed walls. Every surface was carved directly from the mountain itself, showing no sign of assembly. This means any mistake during the carving process would have been irreversible, yet the architecture displays virtually no errors. Why did they choose the hardest possible construction method? And how did they measure and cut rock with such precision in the rugged terrain of the Rhodope Mountains? Many specialists compare Perperikon's stoneworking techniques to those of ancient Peru or Crete, places also noted for their inexplicably advanced megalithic craftsmanship. Another layer of mystery emerges when examining the floors and staircases. Some steps have angled cuts so smooth they resemble machine-made surfaces. Ritual platforms stretching for tens of meters remain entirely seamless, indicating that the area was carved from a single continuous mass of rock. Some deep channels may have been designed to measure the flow of liquids for divination, yet their widths are uniform to the millimeter, something nearly impossible to achieve with ancient hand tools. The technical disparity becomes astonishing when comparing Perperikon to other Thracian sites, which are mostly stone-piled tombs, tumuli, or simple fortresses. Why and how did the Thracians at Perperikon produce a monolithic stone city so advanced relative to their known capabilities? Did they possess a highly specialized artisan class? Did they inherit technologies from a civilization even older, one that vanished before recorded history? Several archaeologists consider the possibility that Perperikon was already a sacred site in the Bronze Age, or earlier, gradually expanded by successive cultures who added their own layers of architecture and ritual. Cultural strata at Perperikon, Bronze Age, Thracian, Hellenistic, Roman, and Byzantine, reveal that the site remained sacred for millennia. Yet a fundamental question lingers: who built the earliest monolithic foundation? There is no direct evidence identifying the original builders, and the deepest layers appear more technically advanced than the later ones. This suggests that the oldest parts may belong to a very ancient, long-lost civilization, leaving behind a structure that subsequent cultures merely adapted and reused. Ritual evidence deepens the mystery. Some altars contain channels running straight from their centers to the edges, possibly for sacrificial blood or wine. No surviving texts describe these ceremonies. How the priests interpreted omens through fire, evaporation rates, or flowing liquids has entirely disappeared with time. Even the functions of many chambers remain debated. Were they ritual halls, repositories of sacred objects, or trance-inducing spaces? The more scholars study Perperikon, the more one truth becomes undeniable. Not only the site's origins and rituals are mysterious, the stoneworking technology itself defies modern explanation. It represents a striking example of how ancient architecture may have been far more advanced than we assume. Perfect flat surfaces, sharp right angles, and finely carved ritual grooves all surpass what is expected from the simple tools known to have existed. Even after decades of research, the Perperikon Thracian Oracle remains one of Europe's greatest ancient enigmas. This massive monolithic complex continues to puzzle archaeologists, captivate researchers, and provoke wonder among history enthusiasts. It forces us to ask, have we underestimated the capabilities of ancient civilizations? Or is Perperikon the remnant of a lost body of knowledge? Whatever the truth may be, Perperikon still stands, towering over the Rhodope Mountains, issuing an eternal challenge to all who encounter it. Try to decipher me if you can. Deep within the dense tropical forests of the Yucatan Peninsula in present-day Mexico lies one of the most mysterious cities of the ancient Maya world, Calakmul. Today the ruins are surrounded by endless jungle, where towering trees, thick vines, and the sounds of wildlife conceal the remnants of a once powerful civilization. For more than 1,000 years, this vast city remained hidden beneath the forest canopy, its pyramids and plazas swallowed by nature. Yet beneath the silence of the jungle lies the story of a forgotten supercity, one that once rivaled the greatest urban centers of the ancient Americas. At its peak between the 4th and 8th centuries CE, Calakmul was not simply another Maya settlement. It was one of the largest and most powerful cities in the entire Maya world. Archaeologists estimate that the city contained more than 6,000 structures scattered across a massive urban landscape that stretched for many square kilometers. These structures included enormous temple pyramids, royal palaces, administrative buildings, ceremonial plazas, and extensive residential districts. When researchers began to map the ruins using modern technologies such as LiDAR scanning, the scale of the ancient city became increasingly clear. Beneath the jungle canopy lay the remains of a complex and carefully planned urban environment, suggesting a population that may have reached 50,000 people or more during its height. What makes Calakmul particularly fascinating is the way this immense city remained hidden for centuries. After the collapse of many Maya cities around the 9th century CE, Calakmul was gradually abandoned. Without continuous habitation, the surrounding rainforest slowly reclaimed the stone structures. Trees grew on top of temples, roots pushed between masonry blocks, and thick vegetation covered roads and plazas. Over time, the city effectively disappeared from the visible landscape. Unlike ruins located in open regions, Calakmul was swallowed by one of the most biodiverse jungles in the Americas. By the time modern explorers began to penetrate the region in the early 20th century, the ancient city had been concealed for nearly a millennium. Its rediscovery in the 1930s astonished archaeologists. As researchers began clearing vegetation and documenting the ruins, they realized they had uncovered one of the most significant Maya centers ever discovered. Massive pyramids emerged from the forest, rising above the canopy like artificial mountains. One of these structures, known today as Structure 2, ranks among the largest Maya pyramids ever built. From its summit, one can see an endless sea of green stretching to the horizon. giving a sense of how isolated the city must have appeared even in ancient times. Yet, despite its remote location, Calakmul was anything but isolated. Evidence suggests it was the capital of a powerful political dynasty often referred to by scholars as the Snake Kingdom, a ruling lineage that controlled alliances and rivalries across the Maya lowlands. But perhaps the most intriguing mystery of Calakmul lies not only in its massive architecture or its hidden location, it lies in the hundreds of stone monuments scattered throughout the ancient city. These monuments, known as stelae, were erected by Maya rulers to record important historical events. Carved from large slabs of limestone, the stelae often depict kings dressed in elaborate ceremonial regalia, surrounded by intricate hieroglyphic inscriptions. These inscriptions served as official records of royal power, documenting victories, alliances, rituals, and the passage of time according to the complex Maya calendar. Calakmul contains one of the largest collections of stelae ever discovered at a Maya site. Archaeologists have identified more than 120 of these monuments within the city's ceremonial centers and plazas. Many of them date back more than 1,000 years. When they were first erected, their surfaces were carefully carved with detailed hieroglyphic texts and images. Some were even painted with bright pigments that made the carvings visible from a distance. Standing upright in ceremonial plazas, these monuments would have functioned as public declarations of royal authority, reminding citizens and visiting elites of the power and legitimacy of Calakmul's rulers. Yet today, many of these inscriptions remain only partially understood. The Maya writing system is one of the most complex scripts ever developed in the ancient world. Although major breakthroughs in decipherment occurred during the 20th century, scholars are still working to fully interpret many of the texts found across Maya sites. At Calakmul, the challenge is even greater because time and nature have taken their toll on the monuments. Centuries of tropical rain, heat, and biological growth have eroded many of the stone surfaces. Some inscriptions have become so weathered that entire sections of text are difficult to read, leaving gaps in the historical record. These damaged monuments create a strange paradox. On one hand, Calakmul preserves one of the richest historical archives of the Maya civilization. The stelae contain the names of rulers, precise calendar dates, and descriptions of political events that unfolded across the Maya world. On the other hand, the story recorded on these stones remains incomplete. Some kings appear suddenly in the inscriptions without clear explanation of their origins. Certain political events are hinted at but never fully described. Entire sequences of dynastic history remain uncertain because key glyphs have been lost to erosion or remain undeciphered. For archaeologists and epigraphers, this means that Calakmul continues to function as a kind of ancient puzzle. Each monument offers clues about the city's past, yet none of them tells the entire story. Researchers must compare fragments of inscriptions with texts found at other Maya cities in order to reconstruct political relationships and historical timelines. Sometimes a single glyph carved on a distant monument can help explain an event mentioned at Calakmul centuries earlier. In this way, the scattered stones of the Maya world gradually reveal pieces of a much larger historical narrative. Another intriguing aspect of these monuments is their sheer number. The concentration of stelae at Calakmul suggests that its rulers placed extraordinary importance on recording and displaying their history. Each monument served not only as a historical record, but also as a political message. By erecting new stelae during important ceremonies, kings reinforced their legitimacy and demonstrated continuity with previous generations. The monuments effectively turned the city's plazas into a permanent archive carved in stone. Visitors walking through these spaces would have encountered a forest of towering monuments, each one representing a moment in the long story of Calakmul's dynasty. Yet despite this impressive archive, many questions remain unanswered. Why did such a powerful city eventually collapse and fall silent? What internal conflicts or environmental pressures may have contributed to its abandonment? And what historical episodes remain hidden within the eroded glyphs of its monuments? The stones of Calakmul still hold secrets that researchers continue to uncover with each new discovery. Today, the ruins stand quietly beneath the jungle canopy, visited by archaeologists, historians, and travelers who venture deep into the protected forests of Campeche. The pyramids still rise above the trees, while the ancient stelae stand weathered but dignified in the plazas where they were first erected more than 1,000 years ago. Each monument is a message from the past, carved by hands that vanished long ago yet still speaking through stone. In many ways, Calakmul embodies the enduring mystery of the ancient Maya civilization itself. A vast super-city hidden in the forest for more than a millennium, filled with monuments that record a history only partially understood, it reminds us how much of the ancient world remains to be discovered. Beneath the silent jungle canopy, the forgotten capital of the Snake Kingdom continues to guard its secrets, waiting for the day when the remaining glyphs are finally read and the full story of this remarkable city is revealed. Hidden deep within the dense highland forests of northern Bali, along the quiet shores of Lake Tamblingan, stands a temple complex that feels less like a monument and more like a fragment of a forgotten world. The site known as Pura Ulun Danu Tamblingan is not surrounded by bustling pilgrimage routes or crowded tourist pathways. Instead, it lies within thick jungle, where ancient trees twist over moss-covered stone and morning mist drifts slowly across the still water of the lake. At first glance, the temple appears modest compared to the grand religious complexes of Southeast Asia. Yet the deeper researchers look into this place, the more it begins to reveal traces of a mysterious past tied to one of the earliest civilizations of Bali. Archaeological evidence suggests that the Tamblingan region was once an important settlement center long before many of Bali's later kingdoms rose to prominence. Historical records and inscriptions indicate that communities thrived here as early as the 10th century, during a period now referred to as the Bali Aga era, an age representing the island's indigenous culture before strong influences arrived from the powerful Majapahit Empire of Java. In those centuries, the shores of Lake Tamblingan were not isolated wilderness. They were part of a thriving spiritual and agricultural landscape where people built temples, cultivated land, and developed complex relationships with the surrounding environment. The most intriguing aspect of this ancient community is the number of temple structures scattered around the lake. Researchers have identified dozens of sacred sites in the Tamblingan region, many of them small, partially ruined, and hidden beneath dense forest. Purolun Danu Tamblingan appears to have been one of the central temples in this network. Its position near the lake's edge suggests that it played a significant role in rituals connected to water, fertility, and the balance between humans and nature. But what makes the site truly mysterious is the question of what happened to the people who once lived here. Unlike many ancient cities where clear layers of abandonment can be traced through archaeology, the Tamblingan settlements seem to have faded quietly into history. There is no evidence of massive destruction, no burned structures, and no signs of violent invasion. Instead, the temples were gradually left behind, slowly reclaimed by forest and time. The communities that once maintained these sacred places appear to have relocated, possibly moving toward other regions of Bali as political and environmental conditions changed. Some historians believe volcanic activity in the surrounding mountains may have altered the region's climate or agricultural conditions, forcing populations to migrate. Others suggest disease or shifts in trade routes could have contributed to the gradual decline of the Tamblingan settlements. Yet none of these explanations fully account for the sudden silence left behind in a place that once held clear cultural and religious significance. Even today, the forest around Lake Tamblingan contains scattered remnants of this vanished society. Temple foundations, carved stone platforms, and ceremonial gateways that appear unexpectedly along jungle paths. Each structure hints at a once organized community whose spiritual life revolved around the sacred landscape of the lake. Among these ruins, the architecture of Pura Uluwatu Tamblingan itself offers another layer of mystery. Unlike many of Bali's later temples, which display elaborate decorative carvings and highly complex structures, the architecture here is strikingly simple. Stone platforms rise just above the forest floor, and small shrine structures stand quietly among the trees. Some gateways are formed from solid stone blocks arranged with surprising precision, yet they lack the ornate flourishes commonly seen in temples built centuries later. This simplicity has fascinated archaeologists. Rather than being a sign of incomplete construction, the restrained architectural style appears intentional. The stonework suggests a form of temple design that predates the more elaborate Balinese temple traditions. In other words, these structures may represent one of the earliest architectural phases of religious construction on the island. The stones themselves reveal impressive craftsmanship. Many blocks appear carefully shaped and aligned despite the absence of visible binding materials. The builders relied on gravity, balance, and precise stone cutting to create stable platforms that have endured centuries of tropical rainfall, humidity, and creeping vegetation. Even after hundreds of years beneath layers of moss and forest roots, the structures remain remarkably intact. Equally intriguing is the placement of the temple complex within the natural environment. Pura Uluwatu Tamblingan is positioned in direct relationship with the lake, surrounding mountains, and forest canopy. Ancient Balinese cosmology often emphasized harmony between the spiritual and physical worlds, and the orientation of temples frequently reflected this philosophy. The positioning of the structures suggests careful planning, aligning sacred spaces with the natural landscape in ways that may have held symbolic or ritual meaning. Some researchers believe the temple complex may have served not only as a place of worship, but also as part of a broader ceremonial network around the lake. Ritual processions may have moved between multiple temples along the shoreline, each representing different aspects of the spiritual balance between water, land, and the human community. Over time, as the surrounding settlements faded, the temple lost its central role in daily life. Without continuous maintenance, tropical vegetation began to reclaim the structures. Tree roots wrapped around ancient stone platforms, vines crept across temple walls, and fallen leaves slowly built layers of soil over carved surfaces. What had once been a living spiritual center became a quiet ruin hidden in the forest. Yet the temple was never entirely forgotten. Local communities in Bali still regard Lake Tamblingan as a sacred place, and traditional ceremonies occasionally return to these ancient temple sites. Offerings are sometimes placed near the old shrines, acknowledging the spirits believed to inhabit the landscape. In this way, the temple remains connected to a living spiritual tradition, even as its origins fade deeper into history. Walking through the temple today feels like stepping into a space where time moves differently. The silence of the forest is broken only by distant birds and the gentle movement of water along the lake's edge. Moss softens the edges of ancient stones, and sunlight filters through towering trees that have grown for centuries above the forgotten structures. For archaeologists, Pura Uluwatu Tamblingan represents more than a ruined temple. It is a window into a period of Bali's past that remains only partially understood. a time before powerful kingdoms reshaped the island's culture and architecture. The simplicity of its stone structures may hold clues to the earlier stages of the Balinese religious design, while the abandoned settlements around the lake raise deeper questions about the fate of the people who built them. Why did a thriving spiritual landscape gradually disappear into the forest? What events caused the communities of Tamblingan to leave behind their temples and sacred spaces? And how much knowledge about this early civilization has already been lost beneath centuries of jungle growth? For now, the answers remain uncertain. What survives instead are quiet stone platforms beneath towering trees, ancient shrines watching over the still waters of Lake Tamblingan, and a temple complex that stands as a silent reminder of a forgotten chapter in Bali's history. Hidden in the misty highlands, Pura Uluwandanu Tamblingan continues to guard its secrets, an ancient sanctuary where architecture, nature and mystery remain intertwined after centuries of silence. Along the banks of the ancient Euphrates River in southeastern Turkey lies a place where time seems suspended between land and water. The half-submerged ruins of Savason village near Halfeti appear almost surreal. Stone houses cling to the cliffs, cave openings stare silently toward the river, and the slender minaret of an old mosque rises from the water like a ghost of a forgotten town. Yet beneath this quiet landscape hides a far older mystery, one carved directly into the rock itself. The caves of Savason village are not merely natural formations. They are the remnants of an ancient human world shaped over centuries, possibly millennia, whose origins remain partly obscured by time and now by water. Long before the modern reservoir transformed the valley, the cliffs overlooking the Euphrates were already filled with openings carved by human hands. These caves form a sprawling network of chambers hollowed into the soft sandstone that lines the riverbanks. At first glance, they resemble simple shelters, but closer inspection reveals something far more sophisticated. Many of the caves contain multiple interconnected rooms, small corridors linking one chamber to another, and carefully shaped niches carved into the walls. Some chambers have window-like openings that frame the river below, allowing light and air to enter while providing a strategic view of the valley. In several caves, archaeologists have identified traces of doorways, stone thresholds, and interior partitions, suggesting that these spaces once functioned as organized dwellings rather than temporary refuges. The layout of many cave complexes suggests a deliberate architectural plan. Rooms appear arranged in clusters, sometimes on different vertical levels carved into the same cliff face. Narrow passages connect these levels, creating what may once have been multi-story underground homes. In certain sections of the cliffs, dozens of caves appear stacked above one another, forming what resembles an ancient vertical village carved directly into stone. The sheer scale of this system raises an important question. Who first began carving these chambers, and how long did the process continue? While some caves may date to the Roman or Byzantine periods, many researchers suspect that the earliest excavations could be significantly older, possibly originating in pre-Roman settlements that once flourished along the Euphrates trade routes. The river itself played a crucial role in shaping life in this region. For thousands of years, the Euphrates served as one of the great arteries of civilization, linking Mesopotamia with Anatolia, the Mediterranean world. Merchants, travelers, and armies moved along its banks, and settlements naturally emerged where the terrain allowed access to water and fertile land. The cliffs of Halfeti provided both advantages and protection. By carving homes into the rock, ancient inhabitants created spaces naturally insulated against the intense heat of the Anatolian summers, while also gaining defensive positions overlooking the river corridor. From within these caves, residents could observe approaching boats or caravans while remaining partially hidden from potential attackers. What makes the cave system particularly fascinating is the way it reflects long-term human adaptation to the environment. The positioning of many openings appears carefully chosen. Some face the morning sun, illuminating interior chambers during the early hours of the day. Others are angled to capture prevailing winds from the river, creating natural ventilation inside the rock chambers. Even without modern technology, the builders clearly understood how to shape the cliffs into comfortable living spaces, using only simple tools and an intimate knowledge of the landscape. Over time, these carved dwellings evolved into a permanent community, integrated into the stone itself. Yet the mystery of Savason village deepened dramatically in the late 20th century. During the 1990s, the construction of the Birekik Dam on the Euphrates River began to transform the entire valley. As the reservoir slowly filled, the water level rose higher and higher along the cliffs. Villages that had existed for generations were gradually evacuated and relocated to higher ground. Among them was the old settlement of Savason. Houses, streets, and historic buildings that once stood on dry land were slowly swallowed by the expanding lake. Today, only fragments remain visible above the water's surface. The most haunting symbol of this transformation is the slender stone minaret of the village mosque, which now rises directly from the reservoir. Its base is submerged, and the surrounding buildings that once formed the heart of the community lie hidden beneath the water. The image is striking, a vertical tower standing alone in the middle of a silent lake, marking the place where an entire settlement once stood. Nearby, the cave openings in the cliffs remain visible, but many of the lower chambers have also been partially flooded, their entrances now touching the waterline. This flooding has created an unusual archaeological situation. On one hand, the reservoir has preserved parts of the old settlement by covering them in sediment and water, potentially protecting structures from erosion. On the other hand, it has made systematic exploration far more difficult. Researchers suspect that additional caves, storage chambers, and perhaps even older structures may now lie beneath the surface of the reservoir. If this is true, the visible caves along the cliffs could represent only a fraction of the original settlement that once extended along the riverbank. The layers of history in Halfeti add another dimension to the mystery. Over the centuries, this region has been inhabited by numerous civilizations that passed through southeastern Anatolia. Assyrian influences once reached the area, followed by Persian control during the expansion of ancient empires. Later, Roman and Byzantine authorities governed the region, establishing trade networks and defensive outposts along the Euphrates. Each civilization left traces of its presence, and the caves of Savason village may have been reused and modified many times as power shifted from one culture to another. Because of this long sequence of occupation, determining the original creators of the cave dwellings is extremely challenging. Some caves display characteristics consistent with Roman-era habitation, such as carved storage niches and structural modifications resembling other settlements of the period. Others appear far more primitive, suggesting that they could predate the classical era entirely. Over centuries, inhabitants may have expanded older chambers, carved new passages, or adapted existing caves for different purposes such as storage, animal shelter, or defense. The result is a layered architectural landscape where multiple historical periods overlap within the same cliffs. This continuity of habitation along the Euphrates highlights how important the river corridor was to ancient societies. Trade routes connected cities of Mesopotamia with communities in Anatolia, carrying goods such as metals, textiles, spices, and agricultural products. Settlements like Halfeti likely served as stopping points along these routes, providing shelter and supplies to travellers navigating the river valley. The caves carved into the cliffs may have offered both secure housing for residents and temporary refuge for merchants or soldiers passing through the region. Today, as boats move slowly across the calm waters of the reservoir, visitors can still see the remnants of this ancient landscape. The cliffs remain dotted with dark openings that once held homes, storerooms, and workshops. Above them rise fragments of stone buildings belonging to the later Ottoman-era village. And beneath the water, invisible yet ever present, lies the rest of the settlement. Streets, foundations, and perhaps entire cave complexes that disappeared when the valley was flooded. The story of the caves of Halfeti and Savason village is therefore not simply the story of a single archaeological site. It is the story of a place where human history accumulated layer upon layer, shaped by geography, trade, and survival along one of the world's most ancient rivers. The carved chambers in the cliffs remind us that generations of people once lived directly within the rock, creating community intertwined with the natural landscape. The flooded ruins below the reservoir reveal how modern engineering can unexpectedly seal fragments of the past beneath water. And the mixture of cultural influences preserved in the caves hints at centuries of human movement through this vital corridor of civilization. Even now, many questions remain unanswered. How extensive was the original cave settlement before the valley flooded? Which civilization first began carving these chambers into the sandstone cliffs? And how many undiscovered structures still lie hidden beneath the waters of the Euphrates reservoir? Until further exploration becomes possible, the cliffs of Halfeti will continue to watch silently over the river, their shadowed openings guarding secrets that have endured for centuries. Hidden deep within the mountains of southwestern Anatolia lies the silent remains of Pinara Ancient City, one of the most intriguing yet least discussed archaeological sites of the ancient world. Today the ruins are quiet, surrounded by forests and rocky hills, but more than 2,000 years ago, this place was a thriving city of the Lycian civilization. Massive public buildings once stood here. Temples overlook the valley, and thousands of people lived within its walls. Yet, what makes Pinara truly fascinating is not only its forgotten history, but the mysterious cliffside necropolis carved high into a towering rock face. Hundreds of tombs cut into stone in places that seem almost impossible for ancient builders to reach. The city belonged to the ancient region of Lycia, a powerful federation of cities that flourished along the Mediterranean coast of what is now southern Turkey. Unlike many neighbouring civilizations, the Lycians developed a unique culture, language, and architectural style that set them apart from both the Greeks and the Persians. Pinara was one of the important members of the Lycian League, an early form of democratic federation that historians sometimes compare to later political systems. Ancient writers describe the city as prosperous and strategically located, surrounded by fertile valleys and protected by steep mountains. But today, most of what remains is scattered stone and a dramatic cliff wall filled with mysterious carvings. From a distance, the most striking feature of Pinara is a massive limestone cliff rising above the ancient settlement. The surface of this rock wall is dotted with hundreds of openings, rectangular, circular, and temple-shaped cavities that resemble the structure of a giant honeycomb. These openings are not natural formations. Each one is a carefully carved rock tomb created by the Lycians more than 2 millennia ago. The sheer number of tombs is astonishing. Archaeologists estimate that the cliff may contain hundreds of burial chambers, making it one of the largest rock-cut necropolises in the entire Lycian world. The arrangement of these tombs immediately raises a puzzling question. Many of them are carved at heights that appear almost unreachable from the ground. Some are positioned dozens of meters above the valley floor, on nearly vertical surfaces of rock. Even with modern climbing equipment, reaching certain sections of the cliff can be challenging. Yet ancient craftsmen managed not only to access these locations, but also to carve elaborate architectural facades into the stone with remarkable precision. The mystery deepens when examining the design of the tombs themselves. Rather than simple openings or burial niches, many Lycian tombs were carved to resemble houses. Their facades imitate wooden buildings, complete with carved beams, doors, columns, and roof shapes. This design reflects a distinctive Lycian belief about death. According to many scholars, the Lycians believed that the soul continued its existence after death in a dwelling similar to the one it inhabited during life. As a result, tombs were constructed as symbolic houses for the deceased. At Pinara, this tradition reaches an extraordinary level of complexity. Some tomb entrances display finely carved architectural details that mimic wooden construction techniques, even though they are carved directly into solid stone. The stone surfaces reproduce features such as roof rafters and structural beams that would normally belong to timber structures. This suggests that the builders were deliberately recreating familiar architectural forms in permanent rock. The precision required to achieve this effect is remarkable, especially considering that the work had to be done while standing on steep or elevated surfaces. One of the most famous tombs at the site is known as the Temple Tomb. Unlike the simpler house-style tombs, this structure resembles a miniature Greek temple carved directly into the cliff face. It features columns, a triangular pediment, and carefully proportioned architectural elements. The craftsmanship is so refined that the monument appears almost like a freestanding building, even though it was sculpted from the natural rock itself. Such work would have required not only skilled stone carvers, but also careful planning, measurement, and structural understanding. This raises an important question that continues to puzzle archaeologists. How exactly did ancient builders carry out this work on such a steep cliff? One common explanation suggests the use of wooden scaffolding. Workers may have erected large frameworks attached to the rock surface, allowing them to stand at different heights while carving the tombs. However, no physical traces of these structures remain today. Since wood decays over time, any scaffolding would have disappeared centuries ago. Without direct evidence, the exact construction techniques remain uncertain. Another possibility is that the tombs were carved from the top of the cliff downward, rather than from the bottom upward. Builders could have lowered themselves using ropes while chiseling the rock face. While this method might explain access to certain locations, it would still require extraordinary skill and coordination. Carving precise architectural details while suspended above the ground would have been an extremely difficult task. The honeycomb appearance of the cliff suggests that the necropolis expanded gradually over many generations. As prominent families sought prestigious burial locations, new tombs were added wherever space allowed. Over time, the cliff face became increasingly crowded with burial chambers, eventually forming the dense pattern visible today. Yet it is also possible that the placement of tombs followed a broader plan, reflecting social hierarchies or family groupings within the city. Unfortunately, many of the inscriptions that might have clarified these relationships have been lost or damaged. Below the towering necropolis lies the rest of the ancient city. The ruins reveal that Pinara was once a large and sophisticated urban centre. Among the most impressive structures is a massive theatre carved into the hillside, capable of seating several thousand spectators. The theatre overlooks the valley, offering sweeping views of the surrounding landscape. Nearby stood temples dedicated to various deities, public baths built during the Roman period, and an agora that served as the city's commercial and social hub. These buildings indicate that Piñara was far more than a small mountain settlement. It was a thriving city integrated into the wider Mediterranean world, participating in trade networks and political alliances. Yet despite its apparent prosperity, the city eventually declined and was gradually abandoned. By the Byzantine era, many of its buildings had fallen into ruin, and the population had moved elsewhere. The reasons for this disappearance remain unclear. Some researchers suggest that earthquakes may have damaged the city as the region is seismically active. Others propose that changing trade routes or political instability weakened the local economy. Environmental factors, including shifts in water supply or agricultural productivity, may also have played a role. Like many ancient settlements, Piñara slowly faded from historical records until it became little more than a forgotten ruin hidden in the hills. Today, the silent cliff filled with tombs stands as the most powerful reminder of the city's past. Visitors who approach the site often describe a strange sense of scale and mystery when looking up at the rock face. The tombs appear like windows into another world, carved by people whose beliefs and skills continue to intrigue modern observers. The honeycomb pattern of openings gives the impression that the cliff itself was transformed into a massive monument dedicated to memory and the afterlife. Despite decades of archaeological study, many questions about Piñara remain unanswered. How did ancient workers safely carve tombs at such extreme heights? Was the layout of the necropolis planned in advance or developed gradually over centuries? What social or religious rules determined who was buried in these elevated chambers? And why did a city that once played an important role in the Lycian League eventually vanish from history? These mysteries are part of what makes Piñara such a compelling site for historians and explorers alike. While famous monuments like the pyramids of Egypt or the temples of Greece attract global attention, places like Piñara remind us that countless other ancient cities still hold secrets waiting to be understood. Hidden in the mountains of Lycia, the cliffside tombs of Piñara continue to watch over the ruins below, silent witnesses to a civilization whose achievements and mysteries are still slowly being uncovered. Tidis Cliff City, nestled against the rugged cliffs of northeastern Algeria, is one of the least known ancient cities yet holds some of the most profound mysteries of North Africa. Unlike major Roman urban centres with accessible forums, baths, arenas and broad roads, Tidis lies in a region that even modern humans find difficult to reach. This perilous location has led archaeologists to wonder, why would an ancient community choose such a steep and elevated place to build a city? And how could they construct such a sophisticated urban system in an environment that challenges nearly all forms of habitation? When stepping into the ruins of Tidis today, the first impression is not its scale, but the sense that every stair, wall and pathway was calculated with a deep understanding of the terrain. This leads us to the most enigmatic aspect of Tidis, the stairways, retaining walls, and pathways that appear far more advanced than what we typically attribute to ancient engineering. What do you think enabled the ancient builders to create such an extraordinarily precise system of stairways and retaining walls that seem to blend seamlessly into the cliffside? Did they possess a lost technique, or are we missing an entire chapter of history? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Unlike traditional Roman roads, which generally occupy stable flat ground, Tidis features pathways running along slopes, winding across steep rocky ridges. Archaeologists have noted that each stone step was carved in a very specific way, matching the natural incline of the landscape, forming steps so solid they almost blend into the mountainside. There is no excess or shortage of materials, no signs of crude patchwork. Everything appears as if it were part of a coordinated blueprint. A major question arises: how did ancient builders measure slopes, calculate gravitational loads, assess structural strength, and design drainage systems without modern measuring tools? The stone retaining walls lining the stairways display an engineering sophistication far beyond their time. They were not constructed for show like Roman fortifications, but were tightly assembled to stabilize the mountainside, prevent erosion, and create habitable terraces. Some walls feature alternating layers of large and small stones, forming a force-locking technique, something seen in other ancient civilizations but usually in military or monumental architecture. In Tidis, this method appears in narrow pathways where only a few people can pass at once. This suggests that the builders of Tidis were not merely masons, but individuals with an extraordinary understanding of geological structure. As one moves deeper into the city, the pathways become even more astonishing. Some are carved straight into the cliff, as if ancient builders had used a hard, precise tool capable of slicing through rock vertically. Other pathways curve perfectly to avoid large boulders or follow the contour of the mountain. Drainage, an essential factor in cliffside architecture, was meticulously planned. Small runoff channels weave between the stone steps, extending downward to prevent rainwater from eroding the walkways. Strangely, these drainage lines have a remarkably accurate gradient, not steep enough to create damaging flows, yet not shallow enough to cause stagnation. No records exist explaining how ancient inhabitants of Tidis executed such complex engineering calculations. Many experts remark that Tidis's pathway system is more sophisticated than that of some military fortresses built during the same era. This has led to a controversial theory. Perhaps Tidis once played a special role, possibly a ceremonial center, a strategic sanctuary, or a sacred location, requiring its inhabitants to build the city with optimal structural and defensive precision. If it were an ordinary residential settlement, the massive effort required to meticulously craft each stone step in such a disciplined manner would seem unnecessary. The retaining walls of Tidis deepen the mystery further. Some are built with red local stone, giving the city its distinctive hue. Under sunset light, the entire city turns a deep crimson, prompting explorers to describe it as a blood-red city suspended in the sky. Even more remarkable, several retaining walls remain intact after thousands of years despite constant exposure to strong winds, heavy rain, and extreme temperature shifts. This demonstrates that ancient builders understood how to distribute weight and design structures aligned with a mountain's natural slope. Beyond stairways and retaining walls, the pathways weaving between structures raise additional questions. They do not merely support movement, they seem intentionally designed to guide inhabitants toward important areas of the city with minimal difficulty. The layout of routes connecting small plazas, shrines, and residential zones reflects a highly deliberate urban plan. Some narrow paths suddenly open into wide spaces, leading archaeologists to speculate that these transitions may have held ceremonial or symbolic meaning, ushering travelers from darkness into light, from confinement into openness. While Roman architecture strongly influenced many parts of the city, the cliffside pathways do not follow Roman standards. This reveals that local Numidian or Berber inhabitants played a decisive role in shaping the city's unique architectural identity. Evidence suggests at least two cultural layers, pre-Roman and Roman. Yet the blending of these traditions is so seamless that determining precise boundaries becomes difficult. This lies at the heart of the mystery. Did the Romans inherit a pre-existing system of stairways, pathways, and retaining walls created by a local culture with remarkable building skills. Additionally, the challenge of transporting stone uphill remains unsolved. The terrain of Tidis is so steep that modern machinery struggles to access it today. So what method did ancient builders use? Ropes and pulleys, stone slides, temporary transport ramps now erased by time? No solid evidence supports any particular method, deepening the enigma. Another curious discovery is the uniformity in the size of the stone steps. The ancient builders appear to have established a standard and adhered to it across generations. This suggests a tightly organized society with rules, supervisors, and construction oversight, something not always found in small mountain communities. Tidis may have served as a military transit point, a sacred center built with special care for rituals, or even a secret training complex. None of these theories are confirmed, but the sophistication of the cliffside pathways strongly implies that Tidis played a far larger role than historical records acknowledge. Today, standing on the ancient steps and gazing across the wide valley below, one can sense that Tidis was more than a settlement. It was a testament to human resilience against harsh natural conditions. At the same time, it feels like a relic awaiting decipherment. Who built this extraordinary architectural system? What tools did they use? And what was the true purpose of this cliffside city? With its strange red hue, intricate stairways, and advanced retaining structures, Tidis Cliff City continues to challenge scientific understanding and ignite the curiosity of all who seek to grasp the true capabilities of ancient civilizations. Rising from the floodplains of central Thailand, the ancient temples of Ayutthaya Historical Park stand today as silent witnesses to a civilization that once rivaled the greatest cities on Earth. Centuries ago, long before modern Bangkok became the heart of Thailand, Ayutthaya was the capital of a powerful kingdom whose influence stretched across Southeast Asia. Foreign travelers arriving by ship described a city filled with glittering temples, towering spires, and an intricate network of canals that wound through the urban landscape like arteries. From a distance, the skyline was dominated by dozens of temple towers rising above the trees, each one reflecting the spiritual and political power of the kingdom. Yet despite its former glory, much about Ayutthaya remains mysterious. Beneath the ruins of its temples lie unanswered questions about lost knowledge, forgotten engineering, and the sudden disappearance of one of the most remarkable cities of the ancient world. Founded in the 14th century, Ayutthaya quickly became one of the most prosperous cities in Asia. Positioned strategically between major river systems, the city developed into a thriving center of international trade. Merchants from China, Persia, India, Japan, and Europe arrived with ships full of goods, turning the capital into a global crossroads of cultures. Some historical accounts suggest that Ayutthaya may have had a population of more than 1 million people at its peak, making it larger than many European capitals of the same era. What makes this even more intriguing is the environment in which the city was built. The entire region was prone to seasonal flooding, yet the inhabitants of Ayutthaya constructed a vast network of canals, reservoirs, and waterways that controlled the movement of water throughout the city. These canals served not only as transportation routes, but also as a sophisticated flood management system. Even today, archaeologists are still trying to understand the full complexity of this hydraulic infrastructure. Satellite imaging and ground surveys suggest that large portions of the ancient city may still lie buried beneath layers of sediment, waiting to be rediscovered. Among the many temples that once filled the city, few are as haunting as Wat Mahathat. Today the temple is famous for a single mysterious image, the stone head of a Buddha statue resting quietly within the tangled roots of a massive tree. The sculpture appears almost perfectly framed by the roots, as if the tree itself grew deliberately around the sacred face. No one knows exactly how the head arrived there. Some historians believe that during the destruction of Ayutthaya in the 18th century, invading forces decapitated countless Buddha statues throughout the city. One of those heads may have fallen to the ground and remained there for decades, until a tree slowly grew around it. Yet the remarkable symmetry of the scene raises questions. The head rests upright and centered within the roots in a way that seems almost intentional. Whether the result of coincidence or quiet human intervention, the image has become one of the most iconic symbols of the city's mysterious past. Another remarkable temple complex can be found at Wat Prasi Sanfet, once the most sacred royal temple of the Ayutthaya kingdom. 3 enormous chedis rise in a perfectly aligned row, each built to house the ashes of former kings. The structures are massive, elegant, and strikingly symmetrical. Their design reflects not only religious devotion, but also a deep understanding of geometry and architectural balance. Constructing monuments of such scale would have required the coordination of thousands of workers, the careful transportation of heavy materials, and precise engineering knowledge. Yet very few records survive that explain how these monumental structures were actually built. The techniques used by Ayutthaya's architects remain only partially understood, leaving researchers to piece together clues from the ruins themselves. Perhaps the most visually dramatic temple of the ancient capital is Wat Chaiwathanaram, located along the banks of the Chao Phraya River. Built in the 17th century, the temple follows a strikingly symmetrical design centered around a towering prang that represents Mount Meru, the mythical center of the universe in Buddhist cosmology. Surrounding the central tower are smaller structures arranged in a geometric pattern that reflects the structure of the cosmos according to ancient religious belief. Walking through the ruins today, visitors can still sense the powerful symbolism embedded in the architecture. Every stairway, corridor, and tower appears to have been carefully placed according to a larger cosmic plan. Some scholars have suggested that the temple's orientation may have been aligned with celestial observations or ritual calendars, though definitive proof remains elusive. Despite its grandeur, the golden age of Ayutthaya ended abruptly in 1767 when the city was invaded by the Burmese army. After a long siege, the defences finally collapsed and the invaders stormed the capital. What followed was a devastating destruction that erased much of the city's history in a matter of days. Temples were burned, palaces were looted, and countless statues were broken or decapitated. Libraries filled with royal chronicles and religious manuscripts were destroyed in fires that consumed entire districts of the city. Many historians believe that this catastrophic event led to the loss of an enormous amount of historical knowledge. Records that might have explained the engineering methods, urban planning strategies, and cultural connections of the Ayutthaya kingdom may have vanished forever during the fall of the city. Even today, centuries after its destruction, Ayutthaya continues to reveal new secrets. Archaeologists working within the boundaries of the ancient capital regularly uncover previously unknown structures hidden beneath layers of earth and vegetation. Ground-penetrating radar and aerial mapping technologies have identified patterns in the landscape that suggest entire temple complexes may still lie buried underground. Some areas of the city remain largely unexplored due to modern settlements built above the ruins, leaving the possibility that significant discoveries are still waiting to be made. The enduring mystery of Ayutthaya lies not only in what has been discovered, but also in what has been lost. The surviving temples offer a glimpse into a civilization that possessed remarkable artistic skill, advanced engineering, and a deep spiritual world-view. Yet, the destruction of the city left many questions unanswered. How did such a massive urban centre manage water and agriculture so effectively in a flood-prone landscape. What construction techniques allowed architects to create such balanced and enduring structures? And what knowledge disappeared in the flames that consumed the capital more than 2 centuries ago? As the sun sets over the ruins and the ancient towers cast long shadows across the fields, the temples of Ayutthaya stand as powerful reminders of a civilization that once flourished at the crossroads of Asia. Their weathered bricks and silent courtyards continue to whisper fragments of a forgotten past. Each collapsed wall and broken statue hints at stories that may never be fully recovered. And somewhere beneath the soil of the old capital, hidden structures and artifacts may still be waiting patiently, holding answers to mysteries that the modern world has only just begun to uncover. The Quilap sarcophagi of Karahia are among the most fragile yet untouchable monuments in the entire Andes, a place where, whenever one looks up at the giant human-shaped figures standing motionless on sheer cliffs, the first feeling is not reverence but bewilderment. The sarcophagi, over 2 meters tall, sculpted in human form with symbolic faces and elongated bodies, were erected in locations with no paths, no construction platforms, and no traces of any support system for transportation. The Chachapoya, called the Warriors of the Clouds because they lived in mist-shrouded forests, left behind no writing to explain why they chose such perilous cliffs as resting places for the dead. Yet this silence itself makes Karahia an unresolvable mystery, a testament to the creativity and structural ingenuity of an ancient civilization that we've only begun to understand. What do you think allowed the Karahia sarcophagi, made only from clay, straw and organic materials, to remain standing for centuries against storms and earthquakes? Was it a lost construction technique, or simply a coincidence of nature? Share your thoughts in the comments below. From afar, the sarcophagi seem to grow directly out of the cliff, suspended in midair, their large round eyes gazing down into the valley as if keeping watch over the living. Inside each sarcophagus lies a single set of remains, an individual of high status in Chachapoya society, a leader, a shaman, or someone with significant spiritual authority. But the major question remains: why did they not bury their dead underground like most civilizations? And why did they grant them tall, upright, human-shaped structures? This appears to reflect a belief that ancestors must remain above, to observe and protect their land, or that the dizzying heights represented a threshold between the realm of the living and that of the divine. However, all of this remains speculation. No texts or religious symbols survive to confirm it. One of the most distinctive aspects of Karahia is its hybrid form, part statue, part sarcophagus, part spiritual effigy. The heads of the sarcophagi are exaggerated, with large engraved eyes and thin lips, often expressionless, yet carrying an air of deep authority. Some are adorned with real human skulls placed on top, symbolizing ancestral power. The red and yellow pigments painted across their surfaces, whose source remains unidentified, still cling remarkably well despite centuries of harsh weather. Though their artistic style resembles no other Andean tradition, neither Inca nor Moche nor any culture of the region, the sarcophagi reveal the Chachapoya's refined symbolic understanding of sacred representation. What makes Karahia even more mysterious is its absolute separation from Quilap, the central seat of Chachapoya power. Quilap was built as a massive stone fortress with high walls and complex defensive structures, yet the Karahia burial site was placed on distant cliffs, with no roads or stairways connecting it. This raises questions among archaeologists. Was Karahia a secret necropolis reserved for an elite group? Did its location serve a ritual purpose beyond ordinary mortuary practice? A place accessible only to the dead, not the living? Even more puzzling is that when modern explorers first approached Karahia in the 20th century, they required ropes, pulleys, and climbing gear. Yet no evidence of similar tools exists from the Chachapoya era. But all of this is only a prelude to the central mystery. Despite being built from highly perishable materials, clay, straw, crushed stone, and organic fibers, the sarcophagi have survived 7 to 8 centuries of storms, erosion, mountain winds, and numerous earthquakes. Not only have they not collapsed, but many have remained nearly intact in shape. This is the very point that archaeologists cannot fully explain: how materials that normally dissolve upon contact with water have endured longer than many stone or adobe structures of the same period. Closer analysis reveals that the coating material on the sarcophagi differs from ordinary adobe. The clay mixture is blended with a particular plant fiber that provides remarkable cohesion, and the outer layer is sealed with a compound whose ingredients remain unidentified. This coating appears to repel water far better than materials used by neighbouring civilizations. Some samples show traces of minerals that may allow slight expansion and contraction, preventing cracks during sudden weather changes. Yet reconstruction attempts in modern laboratories have failed to replicate the original durability. Equally perplexing is the method by which the sarcophagi were fixed onto the cliff. They were not simply placed there, they were attached with exceptional stability. This required the Chachapoya to understand the geological composition of the cliff, identifying secure anchor points and avoiding unstable surfaces. Some theories suggest they carved small niches in the rock as support bases, then built the sarcophagi atop them. A more daring hypothesis proposes that the Chachapoya developed a type of mineral adhesive similar to natural binders used in other ancient cultures, though no solid evidence confirms this. Neither theory explains how material was transported to such a location for construction. Even more astonishing is that several major earthquakes in Peru's history have failed to topple the Carajaya sarcophagi. This has led some experts to propose that the structures are not rigid, but possess a natural elasticity, absorbing seismic vibrations rather than transmitting them. If true, this indicates the Chachapoya had a deeper understanding of material mechanics than previously believed for a civilization without writing. Some experiments show that when gently shaken, the clay surface of the sarcophagi does not crack, but exhibits microflexing, which is highly unusual for ordinary adobe. The Chachapoya may have intentionally or accidentally created a multi-layered structure, each layer with varying compression levels, resulting in a natural form of seismic damping, a technique still studied in modern engineering. While time, rain, and erosion have severely damaged many other Chachapoya sites, Karajia remains inexplicably resilient. This raises the possibility that the materials used for the sarcophagi were specially selected for ritual significance, perhaps believed to hold ancestral spirits more effectively than cold stone. Yet if so, why did this soft material withstand harsh environments better than stone itself? This contradiction has fueled archaeological debate for decades. As modern archaeology attempts to decipher the mystery of Karajia, one question remains unchanged. What technique allowed these sarcophagi to stand for centuries? Was it a deep knowledge of geology, a unique material formula, or a sacred ritual intended to empower the structure? No theory is complete. This uncertainty elevates Karajia beyond conventional archaeological study, transforming it into a symbol of lost knowledge and the extraordinary abilities ancient people could achieve when engineering and belief merged. And on the high cliffs, those motionless human figures continue to stand, defying time, storms, and our understanding, as if reminding us that some secrets are meant to stay forever with the ancestors. The Mycenaean shaft graves are regarded as one of the most astonishing material archives in Greek archaeology, not only because they reveal the image of an extremely wealthy warrior aristocratic class around the 16th century BCE, but also because every detail within these grave pits hints at major mysteries surrounding the origins, techniques, rituals, and formation of power in Mycenaean civilization. The deep shaft-shaped graves, carved vertically into the earth, surrounded by stone circles, and used to bury multiple elite individuals, reflect a unique transitional period in which indigenous cultural elements, Minoan influences, and far-reaching trade networks collided, creating a society both powerful and enigmatic. However, the most haunting, captivating, and difficult to explain mystery is the enormous gold treasure found within these graves. Gold artifacts so refined that their craftsmanship remains an open question. Gold masks, elaborately decorated swords, gold cups, jewelry, and countless precious items reveal a level of metallurgy and artistry far beyond what scholars once believed existed during the early Mycenaean period. Astonishingly, Mycenae is not located near any major gold mines, and the natural resources of the Peloponnese could not have produced such vast quantities of gold. Thus, the question, where did the gold come from, becomes the centerpiece of scholarly debate. Some theories propose that the Mycenaeans imported gold from the Balkans, Anatolia, or Egypt through long-distance trade networks, but the evidence remains inconclusive. Recent isotopic analyses suggest the gold may have originated from multiple sources, indicating that Mycenae participated in a far more extensive exchange network than previously imagined. Yet, this does not rule out the possibility that some portion of the gold came from warfare and plunder, aligning with the image of a militaristic society. Moreover, the craftsmanship of the gold masks, especially the one Heinrich Schliemann famously called the Mask of Agamemnon, adds another layer of mystery. The thinly hammered gold sheet, the sculpting of facial features, the uniformity of the surface, and its aesthetic coherence surpass the technological expectations scholars once associated with the 16th century BCE. Some researchers suspect that the Mycenaeans may have learned directly from Minoan artisans of Crete, known for their sophisticated craftsmanship. Yet, the stylistic features of Mycenaean masks and swords remain distinct, not entirely aligned with Minoan artistry. This raises an even bigger question. Did the Mycenaeans develop a secret metallurgical center, or a specialized craft tradition that has yet to be discovered? Or were these master artisans itinerant craftsmen from elsewhere, commissioned exclusively by Mycenaean elites? With no written records, all hypotheses rely solely on artifacts and stylistic comparisons. The bronze-gold swords engraved with lion hunting scenes, swirling motifs, battle imagery, and marine creatures demonstrate an artistic sophistication beyond their time. The details are so precise that only highly specialized tools could have produced them, yet archaeology has found almost no complete sets of artisan tools from the Mycenaean period. This introduces another puzzle. How are such masterpieces created without leaving behind traces of their workshops? It is possible that the workshops once stood within the original palace complex of Mycenae and were destroyed during later reconstructions, or they may have been located elsewhere and remain undiscovered. Regardless, the gold treasure within the shaft grave stands alone as proof of a technological pinnacle that the surrounding archaeological context cannot adequately explain. The sheer quantity of gold placed into each grave adds even more mystery. This indicates that the deceased were not merely powerful individuals, but political symbols of great significance. If the gold had been imported from distant lands, burying it with the dead would be a highly ritualistic decision, expressing absolute wealth and sovereign authority. But if the gold were obtained through warfare, using it to craft grave goods would reflect a culture that glorified military might. In either case, gold was not merely a valuable material, it was a symbol of power, lineage, and untold stories passed down through generations without ever being recorded. The treasure trove, with its implausibly diverse styles and techniques, also suggests that Mycenaean society engaged in cultural exchange on a much broader scale than previously assumed. Certain jewelry motifs resemble Egyptian styles, some animal designs show Levantine influence, and many decorative patterns reveal ties to Crete. This suggests that the Mycenaeans were far from isolated. They were active participants in the economic and cultural networks of the Eastern Mediterranean. Yet the paradox lies here. Despite these diverse influences, the Mycenaeans maintained a distinctly powerful, militaristic artistic identity infused with ritual symbolism associated with warrior elites. This peculiar blend makes the gold artifacts from the shaft graves a collection that defies classification into any single artistic tradition. Beyond the gold, the shaft grave structure itself carries deep mystery. The choice to use deep vertical shafts rather than the tholos beehive tombs, common in later Mycenaean periods, suggests an older ritual tradition with special significance. Bodies were often buried with weapons, jewelry, and sometimes multiple individuals across generations within the same grave. This may indicate ancestor veneration or a closed, dynasty-like power structure, yet the identities of those buried remain unknown. No linear inscriptions record their names, leaving scholars to infer their status solely from the wealth of their grave goods. Were they ancestors of the kings described in Homeric epics, or members of an earlier, pre-Homeric warrior dynasty that has vanished from historical memory? Schliemann's claim of discovering the mask of Agamemnon only intensified controversy. Today, scholars agree that the gold mask dates centuries earlier than the time traditionally attributed to the mythical Agamemnon. Yet its exceptional craftsmanship and stylistic differences from other masks introduce another mystery. Did it belong to a particularly significant ruler within Mycenaean society? Or did Schliemann inadvertently or deliberately interpret the find to fit his own expectations? Whatever the truth, the mask endures as the symbol of a golden, enigmatic era, accessible only through its material remnants. The circular arrangement of the grave enclosures surrounding the central area of Mycenae continues to puzzle researchers. Their near-perfect symmetry and intentional placement have prompted some to propose links to astronomical observations or royal ritual structures. If true, the shaft graves would not simply be burial sites, but integral components of a complex political religious system in which gold artifacts served as ceremonial symbols of supreme authority. Despite the wealth of artifacts recovered, no written texts explain the rituals or reasons behind burying such vast amounts of gold underground. This renders the shaft graves not only a treasure trove, but also a barrier to knowledge. Each piece of gold is a gleaming fragment that remains silent about its owner's secrets. That silence is precisely what creates the enduring allure. Gold may tell a story of wealth, but it cannot speak of its origins. As a result, the Mycenaean shaft graves stand as one of Greek archaeology's greatest mysteries, a burial complex of powerful warriors, a treasure of unknown origin, a technical achievement without developmental context, and a cultural tableau without explanatory text. Together they form an immense void of knowledge in which the more we study, the more we realize that gold is not the brightest element. The unanswered questions it leaves behind are: where do you think the gold treasure in the shaft graves truly came from? Trade, warfare, or some other unknown source? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Across the lush valleys of western Honduras, hidden among dense tropical forests and winding rivers, lie the remarkable remains of an ancient city that once stood as one of the most powerful, intellectual and artistic centers of the Maya world. The ruins of Copan represent far more than a collection of temples and carved stones. They are the silent remnants of a civilization that possessed astonishing knowledge of mathematics, astronomy, architecture, and writing long before many other parts of the world developed similar systems. Yet, despite decades of archaeological study, Copan continues to raise difficult questions. Its monuments speak through carved symbols, its temples hide earlier structures buried deep within their cores, and its sudden decline still puzzles historians today. In many ways, Copan remains one of the most intriguing archaeological mysteries of the ancient Americas. The city began to rise to prominence around the 5th century AD, becoming the capital of a powerful Maya kingdom that dominated the surrounding region for hundreds of years. Copan was not simply a political center, it was also an intellectual hub where rulers used monumental architecture and elaborate inscriptions to record history and reinforce their authority. Over generations, kings commissioned massive temples, plazas, and stone monuments, transforming the city into a ceremonial landscape filled with sacred symbolism. What makes Copan extraordinary is not just the scale of these constructions, but the level of detail preserved in the carvings that cover many of its structures. Some of the most intricate sculptures ever created by the Maya were produced here, suggesting that Copan may have been one of the greatest artistic capitals of the ancient world. Perhaps the most famous feature of the city is the hieroglyphic stairway, an enormous staircase carved with thousands of Maya glyphs. Running up the side of one of Copan's pyramidal temples, this staircase contains the longest known inscription from the entire Maya civilization. More than 2,000 hieroglyphic symbols cover its steps, forming a monumental text that tells the story of Copan's royal dynasty. These glyphs record the lives of kings, the dates of important ceremonies, and the complex political history of the city over several centuries. Yet even this remarkable historical record is incomplete. Parts of the staircase collapsed long ago, scattering the carved blocks out of their original order. Archaeologists have spent decades attempting to reconstruct the correct sequence of the glyphs, but many sections remain uncertain. As a result, parts of Copan's history are still hidden within a puzzle of stone inscriptions that may never be fully solved. Beyond its famous staircase, Copan is renowned for its remarkable stone monuments known as stelae. These towering pillars were carved to honor rulers and commemorate important events. Standing several meters tall, the stelae display an astonishing level of craftsmanship. The figures depicted on them are surrounded by elaborate headdresses, symbolic ornaments, and mythological imagery connected to the Maya cosmos. What makes these monuments especially mysterious is the precision of the carving. Every detail, from facial expressions to tiny decorative patterns, was sculpted into extremely hard stone using tools that were likely made of stone, wood, and simple metals. The level of refinement visible in these sculptures suggests a mastery of technique that still surprises modern researchers. The layout of Copan itself also hints at a deep understanding of astronomy and cosmic symbolism. Many of the temples and plazas appear to be carefully aligned with celestial events such as the movements of the sun during solstices and equinoxes. The Maya were known for their advanced calendar systems and their detailed observations of planetary cycles, particularly those of Venus. At Copan, architecture may have been used as a way of expressing these astronomical ideas in physical form. Certain structures appear positioned so that sunlight strikes specific areas during key moments of the year, possibly marking important ritual dates. Such alignments demonstrate that Copan was not simply built for practical purposes, but was designed as the sacred landscape connected to the movements of the heavens. Yet some of the most fascinating discoveries at Copan have been made not above ground, but beneath it. Archaeologists exploring the site uncovered an extensive network of tunnels that reveal an unexpected architectural tradition practiced by the Maya. Instead of destroying older temples when new ones were built, the Maya often constructed new pyramids directly on top of earlier structures, encasing the previous temples within layers of stone. Over centuries, this process created architectural time capsules hidden inside the larger pyramids we see today. One of the most famous examples is the temple known as Rosalila, discovered perfectly preserved inside a later pyramid. Unlike most Maya temples, which were weathered and damaged by centuries of exposure, Rosalila remained almost intact because it had been sealed within another structure. Its bright colors, decorative masks, and intricate design provide a rare glimpse of what Maya temples may have looked like when they were newly constructed. Why the Maya followed this unusual tradition remains a subject of debate. Some scholars believe it reflected a ritual respect for the sacred buildings created by previous rulers. Instead of demolishing older temples, new kings may have chosen to bury them ceremonially while constructing larger monuments above them. Others suggest that these layers symbolize the passage of time and the renewal of power within the royal dynasty. Whatever the reason, the practice has allowed archaeologists to explore a hidden architectural history preserved inside Copan's pyramids. Despite its achievements, Copan eventually experienced a dramatic decline. By the late 9th century, construction projects slowed, inscriptions stopped appearing on monuments, and the population began to decrease. Within a relatively short period, the once flourishing city was largely abandoned. The reasons behind this collapse remain uncertain. Some researchers believe severe droughts may have strained the agricultural systems that supported the population. Others suggest that environmental damage caused by deforestation and over-farming may have weakened the region's ability to sustain large communities. Political instability or conflicts with neighboring kingdoms may also have played a role. Yet no single explanation fully accounts for the disappearance of a city that had thrived for centuries. Today, the ruins of Copan stand quietly within the Honduran jungle, their temples rising above the trees, as reminders of a civilization that once flourished there. The carved monuments continue to preserve the faces of ancient kings. The glyphs still record fragments of their stories, and the hidden temples within the pyramids remain silent witnesses to centuries of ritual and construction. For archaeologists, Copan is not merely an ancient city, but a complex historical archive carved in stone. Each discovery adds new clues about how the Maya understood their world, organized their society, and expressed their beliefs through architecture and art. Yet even after generations of research, Copan has not revealed all of its secrets. Many glyphs remain partially deciphered. Entire sections of the city still lie buried beneath the soil, and the deeper meanings behind some of its symbolic carvings are still debated. The ruins continue to challenge historians and archaeologists, reminding us that the ancient Maya civilization possessed levels of knowledge and creativity that modern science is only beginning to fully understand. In this way, the city of Copan remains not only a remarkable archaeological site, but also one of the enduring mysteries of the ancient world. In the southeastern region of the Iberian Peninsula, where barren, rocky mountains meet the seasonally dry Andarax River, the fortified complex of Los Millones has stood for more than 5 millennia as a silent remnant of an era when humans first began to organize complex societies, exploit metals, and most importantly, construct defensive works far beyond what their age should have allowed. Upon its discovery, Los Millares shocked archaeologists not only because of its scale, but also because of a level of sophistication far exceeding what anyone believed an early Bronze Age community capable of achieving. 3 large defensive walls encircle the settlement, each equipped with watchtowers, deep ditches, and carefully placed gate systems intended to control the approach of any enemy. These were not temporary defensive barriers. They were symbols of prolonged anxiety, serious military preparedness, and a society accustomed to the constant threat of external attack. The stacked stone layers, the curved wall segments designed to create advantageous firing angles, and the watchtowers positioned at strategic points reveal that the inhabitants of Los Millares not only knew how to defend themselves, but also understood the art of warfare. Inside those walls, the lives of the Los Millares inhabitants emerged through traces of smelting furnaces, copper tools, clearly organized residential zones, and more than 80 dolmen tombs surrounding the settlement. Notably, these tombs were arranged according to specific rules, possibly linked to astronomical observation or religious rites. This suggests that the community was not only advanced militarily, but also possessed a rich spiritual life and a complex belief system. The grave goods indicate a socially stratified community, where individuals of higher status were buried in larger, more elaborate tombs. However, despite signs of hierarchy, Los Millares left no evidence of a palace or any clearly defined center of political authority. There is no walled-off area reserved for a single leader, nor any tomb overwhelmingly superior to others like the royal graves seen in other civilizations. This raises an intriguing question. Who commanded the construction of this entire fortress? A powerful chief, a council of elders, or a political structure entirely different from anything we know? Copper metallurgy was the defining factor that elevated Los Millares into an economic center of the Iberian region. The smelting furnaces found here prove they mastered the techniques of extracting, heating, molding, and casting copper. Copper artifacts in the Los Millares style have been found at distant sites, indicating a far-reaching trade network. This reinforces the idea that Los Millares was not merely a village, but a regional hub of economic, religious, and military influence. Yet this very wealth may have made it a target for surrounding communities, those seeking to seize its resources, technologies, and power. The discovery of numerous arrowheads, weapons, and burn marks on the walls indicates that the inhabitants had to defend themselves against repeated assaults. The construction of 3 walls was no accident. It was the accumulated response of many generations to dangers long forgotten by modern researchers. Yet amid all this prosperity and preparedness, what makes Los Millares one of Europe's greatest archaeological mysteries is how it vanished, suddenly, quietly, and almost without leaving a trace of the real cause. Around 2300 BCE, this vast settlement was abandoned. There is no thick ash layer pointing to a catastrophic fire, no scattered bodies indicating a massacre, and no evidence of a large-scale epidemic. The inhabitants of Los Millares appear to have left in an orderly fashion, as though following a prearranged plan, taking what they needed and never returning. There are no signs of chaos, no hastily abandoned objects, no half-empty storage areas, no signs of despair. Their disappearance is calm to the point of being unsettling. Many hypotheses have been proposed, yet none sufficiently explain the mystery. The first suggests climate change. Iberia experienced a prolonged drought during that period, leaving the land barren, water scarce, and crops unproductive. This could have forced the inhabitants to migrate to more fertile areas. However, Geological studies show that climate change did not occur suddenly enough to compel them to abandon such a major centre. And if climate truly were the cause, why did this resourceful and resilient community, one that had thrived for centuries, not attempt to adapt? The second hypothesis suggests copper depletion. If the main resource had run out, the economy of Los Millares would have collapsed. Yet modern geological surveys indicate that copper deposits still exist around the site. Moreover, this community already maintained an extensive trade network that would have allowed them to import metal if necessary. Thus, this explanation is also unconvincing. The third hypothesis concerns warfare. Perhaps they were not destroyed in a single battle but worn down by prolonged pressure from newly emerging groups or more aggressive societies. These groups might have gradually weakened Los Millares, reducing manpower and undermining their ability to maintain large fortifications. But if warfare were truly the cause, why is there no clear evidence of destruction? Why did the inhabitants leave in order rather than die on sight or flee in panic? These unanswered questions leave the warfare hypothesis incomplete. The most debated hypothesis involves the rise of the El Argar culture, a powerful society with clear hierarchical structures and advanced metallurgical skills. El Argar emerged immediately after the disappearance of Los Millares, leading many scholars to believe that the inhabitants were absorbed into this new culture. Yet again, there is no direct evidence of conquest, no extensive destruction, no mass violence, and no abrupt architectural or material shift at Los Millares indicating El Argar occupation. If Los Millares people did join El Argar, then the process must have been gradual and peaceful, but this still does not explain why they abandoned an economic, religious and military centre built over generations. What deepens the mystery is the complete absence of any evidence indicating that they built a new settlement elsewhere. No second Los Millares has been found, nor any clear migration trail. The community seems to have dissolved into space and time, leaving no direct descendants, no folklore, no cultural memory. The dolmen tombs fell out of use, the furnaces went cold, the walls remained standing, but no footsteps passed through them again. A once powerful, wealthy and complex society vanished into absolute silence. A silence so profound that many archaeologists believe we're still missing a crucial piece of the puzzle. More speculative theories suggest internal conflict, a shift in religious belief requiring abandonment of the old settlement, or even environmental disasters such as earthquakes or severe erosion. But all of these remain conjecture. No definitive evidence supports any of them. And it is precisely this void where archaeological reasoning cannot reach that makes Los Millares extraordinary. A massive fortress built against unseen enemies, a metallurgical centre of regional influence, a socially sophisticated and spiritually rich community, yet one that evaporated within a relatively short time, leaving behind only mute stone walls. Those walls reveal nothing of their final story. They stand, worn by wind and layered with centuries of dust, as though guarding a truth modern humans are not yet equipped to uncover. And until that missing piece is found, the sudden disappearance of Los Millares will remain one of the greatest unanswered questions in European archaeology. What do you think truly caused a powerful civilization like Los Millares to disappear completely without leaving a trace? Share your thoughts in the comments below. In the rugged landscape of southern Iran, surrounded by dry mountains and the winding course of an ancient river, lie the ruins of a city that once stood as one of the most ambitious experiments in cultural fusion in the ancient world. This was Bishapur, a city founded in the 3rd century CE by the powerful Sasanian king Shapur I. At the height of the Sasanian Empire, Bishapur was not merely another provincial settlement. It was conceived as a royal city, a symbol of victory, power, and imperial ambition. Yet today, As archaeologists continue to study its ruins, two features of Bishapur stand out as particularly mysterious. Deep within the city lie the remains of the strange and enigmatic Temple of Anahita, a structure whose design still raises difficult questions about ancient engineering and ritual. Nearby, scattered across the floors of a royal palace, lie delicate Roman-style mosaics, artwork so unmistakably Mediterranean in style that their presence in the heart of ancient Persia remains one of the most intriguing puzzles of the site. The city itself was founded shortly after one of the most dramatic moments in ancient history. In 260 CE, Shapur I defeated the Roman Emperor Valerian in battle, capturing him and thousands of Roman soldiers. This victory shocked the Roman world and became a defining symbol of Sasanian power. According to several historical accounts, many Roman prisoners were brought eastward into Persian territory. Some historians believe that these prisoners were later used as skilled laborers and engineers in major imperial construction projects. Bishapur may have been one of those projects. From the moment archaeologists began to excavate the city in the 20th century, they noticed something unusual. The layout of Bishapur did not resemble traditional Persian cities. Instead, it followed a carefully planned grid pattern, with wide streets intersecting at near-perfect right angles, a design far more typical of Roman urban planning than of Sasanian architecture. This strange combination of Persian authority and Roman design already hinted that Bishapur might hold deeper cultural mysteries beneath its ruins. Among the most striking discoveries at the site were the mosaics found within the royal palace complex. When archaeologists first uncovered them, the surprise was immediate. Spread across the floors were vibrant images composed of thousands of tiny coloured stones arranged in intricate patterns. Some depicted musicians, dancers, and elegant figures wearing flowing garments. Others showed elaborate floral designs and mythological scenes reminiscent of classical Mediterranean art. The craftsmanship was extraordinary. Each fragment of stone had been cut and placed with remarkable precision, creating shading and depth that gave the images a lifelike quality. Yet what puzzled researchers most was not the beauty of the mosaics, but their unmistakable cultural identity. These mosaics were not Persian in style. Their techniques, themes, and composition strongly resembled Roman and Greco-Roman mosaic traditions. This raises an enduring question that historians still debate today. Who created these mosaics? One theory suggests that Roman artisans captured during Shapur's campaigns may have been forced or perhaps even commissioned to produce them. If this theory is correct, the palace floors of Bishapur may represent the work of Roman craftsmen labouring far from their homeland under the authority of a rival empire. Another possibility is that these mosaics reflect a deliberate act of cultural display. Shapur may have wanted to demonstrate not only his military victory over Rome, but also his ability to absorb and control the artistic traditions of his defeated enemies. In this interpretation, the mosaics become a more than decorative art. They become a visual symbol of imperial dominance and cultural fusion. Yet the mystery deepens when we consider their location. These mosaics were not placed in a small residence or a minor building. They decorated major ceremonial spaces within the royal complex. This suggests that they were meant to be seen by elite visitors and members of the court. The presence of such unmistakably Roman artistic elements in a Persian royal setting hints at a complex relationship between conquest, cultural exchange, and imperial identity. Rather than rejecting Roman artistic traditions, the Sasanians may have deliberately incorporated them into their own visual language. Only a short distance from these palace mosaics stands another structure that continues to challenge archaeologists, the Temple of Anahita. At first glance, the building does not resemble a typical temple. Instead of rising above the surrounding landscape, The structure appears sunken into the ground. Massive stone walls form a rectangular enclosure that lies several meters below the level of the surrounding terrain. To enter the structure, visitors would have descended into the complex, moving downward rather than upward. This unusual design alone sets the temple apart from most ancient religious buildings. The temple was dedicated to Anahita, the ancient Iranian goddess associated with water, fertility, and purity. Water played a central role in her worship, and this connection may explain some of the temple's most unusual architectural features. Archaeologists discovered that the building was connected to a sophisticated water management system. Channels directed water into the temple complex, where it likely flowed through parts of the structure before leaving again through carefully designed outlets. The precision of the stonework is remarkable. Large blocks of stone were cut and fitted together with impressive accuracy, creating walls capable of withstanding constant exposure to water. Despite these discoveries, the exact function of the temple remains unclear. Some researchers believe it may have served as a sacred water sanctuary where rituals of purification were performed. Others suggest that the water flowing through the structure may have symbolized the divine presence of Anahita herself. But the engineering behind the system raises additional questions. Maintaining a controlled water flow through a sunken stone complex would have required careful planning and a deep understanding of hydraulics. How ancient engineers achieved this with the tools available at the time remains a subject of ongoing study. Another curious detail lies in the temple's geometry. The structure appears carefully proportioned, with thick walls surrounding an open central space that may once have contained a pool or basin. The combination of subterranean architecture, water channels, and heavy stone construction gives the temple an almost fortress-like appearance. Yet its purpose was spiritual rather than defensive. Standing within the ruins today, it is easy to imagine how the sound of flowing water might once have echoed through the stone walls, creating an atmosphere both serene and mysterious. When the mosaics of the palace and the strange architecture of the Temple of Anahita are considered together, Bishapur begins to appear less like a typical ancient city and more like a crossroads of civilizations. In one part of the city, Roman artistic traditions appear unexpectedly beneath the feet of Persian royalty. In another, a deeply Iranian religious structure displays engineering techniques that continue to puzzle modern researchers. The coexistence of these elements suggests that Bishapur was more than a political capital. It may have been a place where cultures collided, blended, and transformed. Today, much of the city lies in silent ruins. Walls have collapsed, mosaics have been moved to museums, and the water that once flowed through the temple channels has long since disappeared. Yet the questions remain. Were the mosaics the work of captive Roman artists or evidence of deeper cultural exchange between two great empires? How exactly did the hydraulic system of the Temple of Anahita operate? And what rituals once took place within its stone walls? And perhaps, most intriguingly, what does Bishapur reveal about the relationship between conquest and cultural influence in the ancient world? In the end, the ruins of Bishapur remind us that history is rarely as simple as a story of one civilization replacing another. Instead, the ancient world was often shaped by unexpected encounters, by victories that carried not only soldiers but also ideas, techniques, and artistic traditions across vast distances. Beneath the dust of southern Iran, the mosaics and temples of Bishapur still whisper fragments of that story, one in which Persia and Rome, rivals on the battlefield, became strangely intertwined in stone art and architecture. The Carthage-Tophet debate has long been one of the most persistent and simmering controversies in ancient archaeology, for it revolves not only around a peculiar burial site, but also touches upon a question that shakes the moral foundations of humanity. Did the Carthaginians truly perform child sacrifice? Or was the entire narrative a malicious fabrication crafted by their enemies to justify war and eventual destruction? Whenever Carthage is mentioned, the name Tophet lingers like a historical ghost, for within it lie thousands, even tens of thousands of urns, containing the cremated remains of young children, some accompanied by enigmatic religious symbols. These discoveries force modern scholars to ask what truly happened in this place, and why did such a brilliant civilization become forever associated with such a dark ritual? What do you believe is the truth behind Carthage's Tophet? Did they truly practice child sacrifice, or was it a narrative crafted by their enemies? Share your thoughts in the comments below. For centuries, ancient Greek and Roman texts described Carthage as a barbaric society willing to offer their firstborn children to the god Baal Hammon or the goddess Tanit whenever calamity struck. These writings portray horrifying scenes. Children placed on the outstretched hands of a deity's statue and dropped into flames to plead for victory or good harvests. Yet all these records were written by civilizations that viewed Carthage as a mortal enemy. This forces modern scholars to question, were these descriptions objective or merely political propaganda, a common tactic in the ancient world? If Rome wanted to convince the world that Carthage deserved annihilation, what better method than depicting them as a people who murdered their own children? But the problem lies in this. The Tophet of Carthage is real, and it contains physical evidence that cannot be dismissed. The urns, the stele engraved with the Tanit symbol, the layers of cremated remains extending over many centuries, all undeniably exist. When archaeologists began excavating the site in the 20th century, they found the remains of children ranging from newborns to several years old. Some urns contained only animal bones, perhaps substitute offerings, but most held child remains. This makes the debate even more complex. If not sacrificial, why were only children cremated and placed in a separate ritualized zone? If the Tophet was merely a cemetery for infants who died naturally, why weren't they buried with adults? This unusual separation pushes many toward the sacrificial hypothesis. However, modern analyses do not provide a simple answer. Many bones show that the children died before being cremated, indicating no direct evidence of ritual killing. Yet some studies have detected signs suggesting that bodies may have been burned while still alive. More troubling is that the data remains inconsistent. Each research group reaches different conclusions, and no sample represents the entire Tophet. This opens up an unexpected possibility. Perhaps both explanations are true. Perhaps Carthage buried naturally deceased infants, while also performing sacrificial rituals during specific periods of crisis. But why would they perform such rites at all? The symbols carved on the stela, especially the triangular and circle Tanit emblem, suggest that the Tophet was not merely a cemetery, but a sacred ritual space. Phoenician religious traditions included offerings of firstborn children or animals to deities, a practice referenced across many ancient Near Eastern cultures. Some scholars argue that child sacrifice existed not only in Carthage, but also in Israel, Moab, and surrounding regions. Even the Bible contains passages describing similar customs. If so, was Carthage truly monstrous? Or were they merely practicing a ritual common in the ancient world? One later demonized because they ultimately lost to Rome. What deepens the mystery further is that most of Carthage's written records were burned when Rome destroyed the city in 146 BCE. No Carthaginian texts survived to defend their civilization from these accusations. Everything remaining comes from their enemies. This silence forms the greatest veil over the debate, a void into which any interpretation can be projected. Thus, modern scholarship remains polarized. The side asserting that child sacrifice did occur points to the overwhelming number of urns, which they argue cannot be explained solely by infant mortality rates. The stratified layers of ashes indicating rituals spanning centuries, and the restricted burial area dedicated exclusively to children, which they interpret as strong ritual evidence. Meanwhile, the opposing side emphasizes that Roman accounts were heavily biased. Carthage was Rome's greatest rival, and attributing barbaric practices to them was an ideal strategy to justify their extermination. They argue that infant mortality rates in antiquity were extremely high, making the number of urns unsurprising, and that cremating infants separately may simply reflect a spiritual or cultural practice, not ritual killing. Perhaps the most mysterious aspect is the inconsistency within the bioarchaeological evidence. If the Tophet was a site of sacrifice, why do so many children show signs of natural death? If it was only a cemetery, why do some remains appear to have been burned alive? And if it were a mixture of both practices, why does Carthage alone show such evidence when other Phoenician cities like Tyre and Sidon do not? The uniqueness of the Tophet makes the mystery even more perplexing. Adding to this complexity are the carved stelae featuring hand symbols, flames, and the Tanit emblem, suggesting a sophisticated ritual tradition now lost to time. Some stelae bear Punic inscriptions asking the gods to bless the offering, yet the term offering is ambiguous. It could refer to animals, objects, or humans. This linguistic uncertainty deepens the interpretive fog. From a broader perspective, the Carthage Tophet debate stands as a confrontation between physical evidence and historical bias, between archaeology and political propaganda, between the brutal realities of the ancient world and how modern humans attempt to interpret them. And despite hundreds of academic studies, the mystery has never been resolved. The only certainty is this: Carthage no longer has the chance to speak for itself. This silence renders the Tophet one of the most profound ancient enigmas, a reminder of how history can be reshaped depending on who holds the pen, leaving us forever uncertain whether Carthage truly sacrificed its children or was merely the victim of a dark story crafted by the victors. The Ramesseum Library claims have long stood as one of the most captivating enigmas of ancient Egypt, centered around the question of whether a secret library once existed within the mortuary complex of Pharaoh Ramesses II, the most powerful pharaoh in history. What makes this story so extraordinary is not only the monumental scale of the Ramesseum, with its colossal pillars and shattered statues of Ramesses II, but also the scattered, vague, and haunting descriptions in ancient texts portraying the site as a repository of sacred knowledge known by names such as the House of Life or Library of Ramesses. These were not invented by modern imagination. As early as the Greco-Roman period, several writings suggested that the Ramesseum once functioned as a center of knowledge storage, housing administrative records, magical writings, medical texts, astronomical documents, and royal ritual manuscripts. Paradoxically, although such writings mention this archive, modern archaeology has yet to uncover any direct evidence confirming the presence of a complete library. This absence has turned even the smallest fragment of information into the foundation for countless compelling theories. During 19th century excavations, some European researchers noted the presence of sunken structures, strange underground chambers, and areas they believed might once have served as papyrus storage rooms. However, many inscriptions, carved blocks, and writing-related artifacts were removed, damaged or lost during transportation to museums. This inadvertently obscured the verification of the Ramesseum library even further. What remains today are only a few scattered papyrus fragments, traces of writing desks, and tools belonging to scribes, the royal record keepers. Although insufficient to prove the existence of a large-scale library, their presence indicates that the Ramesseum certainly functioned as some form of intellectual center. Mortuary temples were used to record the pharaoh's reign, military achievements, and divine narratives surrounding royal authority, making the existence of an archive fully reasonable. Given Ramesses II's exceptionally long reign, nearly 67 years, the theoretical volume of documents relating to him must have been immense. But the greatest question remains unanswered. Where did all of it go? Scattered ancient accounts, sometimes referring to the book collection of Ramesses, the House of the God's Memory, or the Chamber of Sacred Knowledge, only add another layer of mist to the mystery. None of these documents specifies an exact location. No archaeological evidence points to a library-like structure underground, nor has any discovery recorded a detailed knowledge storage system at the site. Moreover, the Ramesseum's surviving architecture still contains many unexplored areas. Underground rooms, sand-filled corridors, and broken foundations hinting at collapsed structures below. Some 19th century survey sketches depict signs of small, interconnected chambers resembling the archive rooms found in other New Kingdom temples, but all of this remains speculative. Here, the deepest layer of the mystery begins to unfold. If the library did exist, where is it now? No question about the Ramesseum has sparked more debate or curiosity. One theory proposes that unexcavated lower levels remain buried beneath deep desert sand, concealing the potential archive in darkness for thousands of years. Another theory argues that the library was completely destroyed when the temple suffered waves of devastation during the late period and Roman occupation. The collapse of colossal columns, multi-ton statues, and massive walls suggest that any archive could have been crushed and buried beyond recognition. The third theory, more dramatic and widely discussed, suggests that the texts were deliberately relocated before the temple fell into ruin, moved to a safer site. Ancient Egyptians often transferred sacred materials to other temples when preserving knowledge became essential or when political instability threatened their safety. If the Ramesseum library existed, the relocation might have occurred near the end of Ramesses II's reign or under his successors. The documents could have been taken to Karnak, the archive at Abydos, or even to unknown secret repositories. Some modern scholars link this idea to the legend of the Library of the Pharaohs, a sacred treasury of knowledge believed by some to have inspired later myths surrounding the Library of Alexandria. Though without solid proof, the repeated appearance of the hidden Egyptian library motif across centuries keeps this theory alive. The mystery deepens when considering current archaeological constraints. Although much of the Ramesseum's surface has been excavated, many subterranean structures remain inaccessible. Geological instability, erosion, subsidence, and the complete decay of mud brick layers have made finding entrances to underground chambers extremely difficult. No one knows whether sealed rooms lie beneath the rubble. Ground scanning images are too limited, and deeper excavation risks damaging surviving monuments. If the library truly lies underground, it is still there, simply beyond our reach. Another element reinforcing the enigma is the unreliable nature of 19th and early 20th century excavation records. Some explorers reported seeing inscribed stone blocks or small interlinked rooms without documenting their exact locations. Certain artifacts in European museums labelled as possibly from the Ramesseum lack proper excavation records, preventing scholars from verifying their origins. If these lost items were indeed part of Ramesses II's archive, then the most crucial evidence for the library may already be gone forever. Strangely, even though no library has been confirmed, the Ramesseum contains many indicators of a former knowledge system: scattered papyri, writing tools, remnants of workspaces, and wall depictions of scribal activity. The papyri discovered, though very few, spanned diverse subjects such as medicine, ritual practices, and temple administration, reinforcing the belief that the original number of documents must have been far greater. Yet this leads to an even heavier question. If these fragments are only remnants, where is the rest? From all these analyses, the core of the Ramesseum library claims narrows into a single question. If the library truly existed, how did it disappear? Was it buried, relocated, destroyed, or hidden somewhere we have never imagined? Perhaps the answer lies beneath deep layers of sand, within collapsed underground chambers, or in another temple far from the Ramesseum. It is also possible that the library never existed as a physical space, but rather as a symbolic reference to a center of ritual and knowledge linked to Ramesses II. Yet the most certain truth is this: the question "where is it?" remains one of the most compelling unsolved mysteries of ancient Egypt, and the Ramesseum's silence only deepens its aura, cementing it as one of the most haunting and captivating archaeological legends of all time. When people mention the ancient city of Ephesus, they often think immediately of Marble Street, the Temple of Artemis, or the famous Library of Celsus. Yet, on the slope to the right of Curates Street lies an entirely different world, one that remained almost concealed from history for thousands of years, revealing its most delicate and mysterious aspects only after excavation. This is the Ephesus Terrace Houses, a luxurious residential complex for the Roman elite, often dubbed the Pompeii of Turkey. These houses do not merely depict a lifestyle of unimaginable opulence. They harbour mysteries that continue to challenge archaeologists today. The enigma of unusual pigments in the frescoes, building techniques far ahead of their time, and the sudden disappearance of the residents. With the mysteries surrounding the unusual pigments, advanced construction techniques, and the puzzling disappearance of the residents, what do you think is the most important clue that could help unravel the secrets of the Ephesus terrace houses? Share your thoughts in the comments below. One of the first astonishing questions is why the wealthier citizens, instead of selecting broad, open land to build their villas, chose to construct an entire upper-class neighborhood on a narrow and steep hillside. Leveling the ground, reinforcing the foundations, creating terraces, and dividing the slope into multiple tiers required immense manpower, planning, and financial resources. So what was the true motivation? Some theories suggest this location allowed them to overlook the entire city from bustling markets to the strategic harbour. Others believe this was an elite zone adjacent to major religious and administrative structures, symbolising the influence of noble families. Still, some suspect that the Roman elite of Ephesus had particular spiritual or cosmological reasons, something not clearly recorded in ancient texts. Inside the terrace houses, the advanced building techniques raise even more questions. Some rooms feature hypercoursed underfloor heating systems, a luxury usually found only in the most extravagant villas of the empire. Hot air channels were meticulously arranged beneath marble floors to distribute heat evenly without damaging the structure. The water supply system, with pipelines, cisterns, and pressure-regulating channels, also far surpassed many medieval European cities. This has led to speculation that the inhabitants were not only wealthy but powerful enough to secure the best engineers, artisans, and architects from across the Roman Empire. Yet the greatest, strangest, and most captivating mystery of the terrace houses lies in their frescoes and mosaics. The paintings emulate Roman styles, but contain subtle influences of Greek art and Anatolian traditions. Their craftsmanship is so refined that many cannot believe the paintings are over 2,000 years old. The reds remain vibrant, and the deep blues look freshly painted. This leads to the most heated debate. Where did the pigments come from, and why have they remained so remarkably stable over the centuries? Analyses show that some of the pigments do not match mineral compositions found around Ephesus. In particular, the deep reds and distinctive blues detected in the fresco layers seem to originate from distant regions. Some researchers argue that artisans imported pigments from Egypt, famous for producing Egyptian blue, humanity's earliest synthetic pigment known for its durability. However, samples from the terrace houses do not perfectly match known Egyptian blue. Some chemical components resemble a mixture of Afghan lapis lazuli and local Anatolian minerals, prompting the question, just how far-reaching were their trade networks? Even bolder theories suggest that the elite of Ephesus possessed a secret pigment-making formula produced in workshops that have yet to be discovered. The colours are not only durable but also astonishingly vibrant after millennia, raising the question, did they use a special binder, a long-lost solvent, or a painting technique erased by the passage of time? The mosaics are equally enigmatic. Microscopic pieces form detailed mythological scenes, portraits, and daily life imagery using marble, glass, and rare minerals. Some mosaic tiles exhibit unusual translucence and reflectivity, evidence of an advanced glass firing technique whose origin is still unknown. Who created these pieces? Were they local artisans, craftsmen from Italy, or a travelling guild of elite mosaic specialists serving noble households throughout the empire? Another curious detail is the inconsistency in artistic style. Some frescoes resemble older Hellenistic art, while others align with Roman taste from the Augustan period. This raises suspicion that earlier decorative layers lie beneath, overlapped by successive generations. If true, the terrace houses would serve as a cultural archive, storing centuries of evolving artistic traditions. But confirming this would require peeling back wall layers, a risky endeavour that could permanently damage the artworks. But the mysteries extend beyond colour and art. The internal architecture of the terrace houses contains layers that defy explanation. The complex includes servant corridors, hidden staircases, small windowless chambers, and hollow spaces beneath the floors. Some small rooms are decorated with unusual lavishness, far beyond practical needs, suggesting they may have served ritual purposes or housed private, elite social activities. In several houses, daily objects, dishes, statues, and household items were left exactly where they stood, as if the inhabitants fled abruptly. This supports the theory of a major earthquake. However, destruction levels are inconsistent. Some areas remain nearly intact while others collapsed entirely, prompting the question, was an earthquake the sole cause, or did war, disease, or internal conflict also contribute to their sudden disappearance? Deep excavations beneath the terrace houses have revealed bricks and structural components from earlier Greek periods, even traces of indigenous Anatolian architecture predating Roman Ephesus. This suggests the complex may have been built atop older structures, or that the slope had long been a residential zone continuously modified over centuries. If true, an older Ephesus, previously unknown, may still lie hidden beneath the soil. All these elements make the Ephesus terrace houses one of Turkey's most enigmatic archaeological sites. They not only illuminate the lives of the Roman elite, but also pose countless questions about engineering, art, trade, belief systems, and the dramatic transformations of a once prosperous Mediterranean metropolis. And at the heart of the mystery, the unusual pigments in the frescoes and mosaics, remains a historical puzzle with no definitive answer, challenging both modern science and human imagination. The area today known as the Sogmatar Moon Temple lies in the semi-arid expanses of southeastern Anatolia, where cracked earth and barren hills stretch across the horizon like traces of a civilization long drowned in silence. Although called a moon temple, it has no grand religious structures, no towering pillars, no domed sanctuaries like the monumental worship centers of ancient Mesopotamia. Instead, the entire landscape, from windswept valleys to natural stone platforms carved with strange markings, functions as an open temple, as if ancient people chose nature itself as their sacred house. Sogmatar has long been regarded as a center dedicated to Sin, the supreme moon god, yet the complexity of the rituals practiced here far exceeds what modern archaeology is currently able to explain. Recent studies suggest that Sogmatar was not merely a place of worship but may have functioned as a pilgrimage center, combined with an extraordinarily sophisticated system of astronomical ritual practice. What astonishes scholars is the arrangement of 7 hills surrounding the central area, each hilltop corresponding to an ancient celestial body: the Sun, the Moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. Nowhere outside ancient Mesopotamia do we find such a deliberately organized cosmic landscape. Their symmetry evokes the image of a colossal celestial map, where every ritual took place under the symbolic governance of 7 heavenly bodies. Yet even after this model is recognized, one overwhelming question remains: how did ancient people measure, orient, and determine the positions of these hills without any known astronomical instruments? In the Central Valley, ancient Syriac inscriptions and carved reliefs on the rocky walls of Yazilikaya recount stories of priest-kings, rituals of moon worship, and sacred days when lunar light played a central role. But despite being carved into stone, much of the content remains undeciphered. Many sections are worn away, and several characters do not correspond to any known writing system, leading some archaeologists to suggest that these inscriptions belong to a type of ritual language understood only by an esoteric priestly class. Thus, even the inscriptions of Sogmatar exist beneath a veil, revealing one part while concealing the rest, much like the moon, which always hides one half of its face. What puzzles researchers most is the presence of clear astronomical indicators, contrasted by the complete absence of observational instruments. Stone platforms at Sogmatar are aligned with the moon's rising and setting positions during important ritual days. Curved stone grooves seem to correspond to the moon's 29.5-day cycle. Certain rock protrusions, when viewed from specific positions, line up with hilltops during seasonal transitions, as if ancient people created natural markers to determine ritual timing. All of this suggests a structured astronomical ritual system requiring precision and deep knowledge of the night sky. Yet the paradox remains: no shadow measuring devices, no observation towers, no alignment pillars, no metal instruments, nothing at all. How then did the ancient inhabitants of Sogmatar track celestial movements? One theory proposes that they used the landscape itself, hills, stone platforms, and crevices as observational tools. When the moon crossed the horizon or appeared in a specific position, its light would strike these platforms at characteristic angles. Thus, Sogmatar may have functioned not merely as a temple but as a stone-built astronomical machine, using nature in place of crafted instruments. However, some scholars argue this is unlikely given the level of orientation precision, which seems to exceed what can be achieved through naked eye observation alone. More radical theories suggest that wooden instruments may once have existed, materials that would not survive millennia. Yet if this were true, why are there no remaining traces? No post holes, no eroded foundations, no auxiliary artifacts, nothing to indicate that external devices ever stood here. Some researchers propose that Sogmatar's astronomical rituals didn't require instruments at all. Their knowledge system may have been oral, built upon observation across generations, refined into rules passed down to the priestly class. For them, astronomy was not a science in the modern sense, but a sacred practice embedded within faith. Thus, measurement tools were unnecessary, because to them, the moon was not merely an object in the sky, but a deity, a protector. They needed only to watch the movements of the divine to determine ritual timing. Even if we accept this theory, one profound mystery remains. Why is the cosmic model at Sogmatar so accurate? The synchronization of 7 hills with 7 ancient celestial bodies in an orderly layout cannot be dismissed as coincidence. It suggests a conceptual system far more advanced than simple folk ritual. It implies the presence of a designer, or a group of priest astronomers, with knowledge deep enough to transform an entire landscape into a massive ceremonial chart. This strengthens speculation that Sogmatar may be far older than archaeologists currently believe, possibly originating in prehistoric times. When mainstream history assumes humans lacked the capability to create complex astronomical constructions, the layered history of Sogmatar further complicates interpretation. The region once belonged to multiple civilizations, Hurrians, Aramaeans, early Syriac Christians, yet none recorded the site's true origins. It is as though every culture merely inherited an already sacred place, using it in their own ways without knowing who first consecrated it. This creates the impression that Sogmatar was not established at a single point in time, but maintained across centuries as a holy land no one dared alter. Today, standing in Sogmatar, modern visitors often feel as though they are entering a realm outside the familiar world. The rocky hills rise like cosmic markers. Flat stone platforms resemble ancient altars. Dark crevices evoke ritual chambers where priest-kings may have whispered prayers to the god Sin. No sound exists except the wind, yet something feels as though it is waiting to be spoken. The absence of answers, the silence of stone, sky and history, makes Sogmatar more compelling than any other ancient ruin. Everything appears intentional, yet its purpose is blurred. Every stone feels like a question left behind. This is why the Sogmatar Moon Temple remains one of the greatest archaeological enigmas of the Middle East. A place with clear evidence of astronomical ritual, but no instruments, a cosmic model without an explanatory record, rituals without complete inscriptions, a temple without walls, roof, or artifacts, yet containing astronomical knowledge far beyond what we can decipher. Perhaps, like the moon itself, Sogmatar reveals only a portion of the truth, leaving the rest forever in the shadows. If no observation tools have ever been found, what do you think the ancient people used to track the movements of the moon and other celestial bodies? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The Jericho Tower. Purpose has long been one of the most debated subjects in prehistoric archaeology, not only because it is a monumental structure from the pre-pottery Neolithic period, but also because it demonstrates a level of social organization far beyond what we imagine of humans more than 8 millennia ago. Standing about 8.5 meters tall with a base diameter of over 9 meters, the Jericho Tower rises from the heart of the early settlement at Tel Sultan, posing a persistent question. Why would people who are just transitioning from hunting and gathering to early agriculture expend enormous labor to build a structure that even many more advanced societies thousands of years later may not have been able to create? This historical contradiction has made the tower's true purpose one of the great unresolved mysteries for decades. Why do you think the people of Neolithic Jericho, with such limited resources, chose to build a monumental tower of this scale? Share your thoughts in the comments below. When examining the Jericho Tower, archaeologists immediately noticed the strange mismatch between the size of the structure and the size of the community. Around 8,300 to 8,500 BCE, Jericho was not a large city. It was merely one of humanity's earliest settlements, where people began experimenting with cultivation, animal domestication, and sedentary life. Yet in this very place, they erected an enormous stone tower containing an internal spiral staircase, an architectural technique requiring geometric thinking, organization, and highly coordinated labor. This overcapacity has led researchers to question whether the ancient inhabitants of Jericho were aiming for something beyond mere survival needs. One of the earliest proposed explanations is defense. The Jericho Tower is connected to a thick stone wall, leading many scholars to believe that the entire complex served as a fortification, protecting the community from wild animals or hostile groups. However, archaeological evidence does not fully support this view. There are no signs of warfare, weapons, or violent destruction at Jericho during this period. Furthermore, if defense were the sole purpose, investing such massive labor into an unusually tall tower seems illogical. Shorter, thicker walls would have been far more effective than a towering vertical mass. Thus, the Jericho Tower cannot be explained simply as a military structure. This conceptual gap gave rise to the second and increasingly compelling hypothesis. The Jericho Tower was an astronomical construction built to observe and mark important solar events. A well-known study shows that on the summer solstice, when the sun sets, the shadow of Mount Kuruntal to the west creates a special effect. The shadow line falls directly onto the Jericho Tower at a perfect angle. This phenomenon is unlikely to be a coincidence. It suggests that the people of Jericho had long observed the movement of the sun and understood its cycles well enough to align a major structure along a fixed astronomical axis. This implies not only early scientific thinking, but also that the tower may have functioned as a marker for significant times of the year, possibly harvest festivals, communal rituals, or solar-based religious ceremonies. Some researchers even believe the tower acted as a kind of giant solar clock, helping inhabitants determine seasonal transitions. However, if the Jericho Tower served only astronomical purposes, this alone would not fully explain its complexity. This is where the mystery deepens. The tower may have been a multifunctional monument, combining defensive, ritual, astronomical, and socio-political purposes. This layered functionality is likely the key reason why its true purpose has never been fully resolved. Beginning with its symbolic role, many scholars argue that the construction of such a monumental structure helped reinforce the authority of emerging leaders within the community. As humans transitioned into agricultural life, managing water, food supplies, and resource distribution required higher levels of societal organization. Those who took on leadership roles may have wished to create a structure that expressed their power, uniting the community while demonstrating their ability to govern. The Jericho Tower may therefore represent an early form of architecture of power, a phenomenon later seen in civilizations such as Egypt, Mesopotamia, and the Maya. Furthermore, the tower may have functioned as a ritual space, where the community gathered to perform ceremonies related to life, death, the agricultural cycle, or sun worship. The spiral staircase inside suggests the structure was meant to be entered and ascended, offering a transformative physical experience separate from everyday life. Climbing the tower during rituals may have symbolized reaching toward the divine or affirming ceremonial authority. Many ancient cultures built towers, pyramids, and ziggurats to represent sacred mountains, and it is highly plausible that the people of Jericho shared this same conceptual framework. Another hypothesis proposes that the tower was connected to a cultural fear of natural phenomena, specifically the shadow of the mountain. In some ancient societies, mountain shadows were interpreted as signs of seasonal change, danger, or supernatural power. Building a tower to interact with the shadow could have given inhabitants a sense of control over natural forces, reducing uncertainty in their environment. Because so many plausible explanations exist, the Jericho Tower's true purpose remains one of archaeology's greatest puzzles. If it was only for defense, why the precise astronomical alignment? If only for ritual, why build it so large and integrate it with fortifications? If only astronomical, why include a staircase allowing many people to enter it? The only answer that reconciles all elements is this: the Jericho Tower did not serve a single purpose. It was a multifunctional structure, reflecting humanity's profound societal transformation from egalitarian communities to stratified systems with leadership, spiritual practices, and the need to track natural cycles. This multifunctionality has made the tower a vivid symbol of an era when the boundaries between survival, spirituality, authority, and astronomy were deeply intertwined. The Jericho Tower stands as evidence that, even in the Stone Age, humans dreamed boldly, looked to the skies, and built structures far beyond what their modest communities would suggest. And perhaps because they built the tower to serve many different purposes at once, we cannot determine its primary function today. That mystery endures, living alongside the stone walls that have stood firm for more than 10,000 years, a reminder that ancient humans were far more complex and profound than history often portrays.